7 years I'd spent building a life in the Alaskan oil fields. I came home to Ohio with $4 million in the bank, but the moment I stepped into the house, my world froze. My son was living in a dilapidated shed out back. I turned to my mother, my voice tight. "Where's Hannah?" She answered coldly. "She ran off with another man." My son, his face streaked with tears, whimpered. "Grandma's lying." Hearing that, my heart stopped. Nearly 2,500 days I had toiled in a land of ice and strangers. I returned to my hometown with 2 suitcases overflowing with gifts, eager only to hold my wife and the son I'd watched grow up through a phone screen. But as I walked into the very mansion built with the money I'd sent home, my own mother slammed her hand on the table and said, with ice in her voice, "Your wife took $18,000 and left with another man." What sent a shiver down my spine, however, was that no one in the family could explain why they hadn't called the police. On the afternoon of the 22nd of May 2026, my small town on the banks of the Ohio River was veiled in a spring rain as fine as smoke. The country lane was dark with moisture, the smell of damp earth mingling with the scent of wood smoke. The rows of oak trees in front of the house swayed gently in the wind, a stark contrast to the fire raging in my heart. I believed that in just a few minutes, I would see my wife and son after nearly 7 years apart. My name is David Miller, 37 years old. Almost 7 years ago, I left Ohio for Alaska to work as a specialized HVAC technician, leaving behind my wife Hannah and our son Leo, who was just over a year old. Back home were my mother, Eleanor Miller, my older brother, Michael, and my sister-in-law, Jessica. All those years on the other side of the continent, I thought I was doing the right thing, working hard to earn enough so my family wouldn't have to struggle. The car stopped in front of a black iron gate. I sat for a moment, watching the 2-story mansion emerge through the curtain of rain. Cream-colored walls, a red-tiled roof, and a clean stone-paved yard. In a corner of the yard, a set of wooden patio furniture sat under a trellis of blooming wisteria. I smiled to myself. It finally looked like a proper home. The driver asked, "Need a hand with the bags?" I shook my head. I wanted to pull them in myself, to see the surprise on my family's faces. In the blue suitcase was a bracelet for Hannah, and a model airplane Leo had reminded me of on a call. "When you come home, Daddy, remember to buy it for me, okay?" I paused for a moment, my eyes lingering on the row of oaks my father had planted years ago. They now stood taller than the roof, but the wooden swing I had built for Hannah and Leo was gone. I figured they must have cleared it out during the new construction, so I just smiled to myself. A new house meant new things. I hadn't even rung the doorbell when our golden retriever started barking furiously. My mother ran out to the porch, her hair now more silver than brown. "David? David, is that you, son?" I dropped the suitcases and wrapped her in a hug. "I'm here, Mom. I'm home." She patted my back, crying and chiding me at the same time. "Why didn't you give us a heads up? You scared me half to death." Michael and Jessica came out too. My brother had the same sturdy build, his skin weathered by the sun. Jessica looked at my 2 large suitcases and smiled. "Look at you, David, showing up like a surprise inspection. We didn't even have time to roll out the red carpet." I joked back, "What's a red carpet between family? A hot pot roast is all I need." Michael clapped me on the shoulder. "Long trip? You tired?" "I'm fine, Mike." I looked around the yard and then into the house. "Where are Hannah and Leo? I don't see them running out." The smile on Jessica's face froze. Michael, who had been about to help with a suitcase, stopped. My mother looked down and adjusted her blouse, though it wasn't crooked. I assumed Hannah had taken Leo to the store, so I asked cheerfully, "Where'd they go, Mom?" "Leo probably won't even recognize me." My mother didn't answer. Jessica cut in, "You've had a long journey, David. Come in and have a drink of water. We can talk later." I looked at her. "Talk about what?" No one answered. There was only the sound of rain tapping on the porch roof. My mother pulled me by the arm into the house. The living room was spacious, with an elaborately carved wooden furniture set and a large TV mounted on the wall. Everything was new and expensive, but there wasn't a single photograph of Hannah or Leo. I sat down, my hand resting on the blue suitcase. "Mom," I said, "where are my wife and son?" She poured tea, the water spilling over the rim of the cup without her noticing. Michael sat across from me, his hands clasped tightly. Jessica stood by a cabinet, her eyes darting around. After a long moment, my mother said, "She's gone." "Who's gone, Mom? Gone where?" My mother slammed the teapot down on the table. "Your wife. She took $18,000 from the house and ran off with another man. She even took Leo with her." "Stop asking so many questions." I sat motionless. Her words couldn't drown out the sound of the rain, but in my head, they exploded like a bomb. "She took money? From where?" "From the house account." "And left with who?" "Some guy from town." "What's his name?" My mother faltered. Jessica immediately held a phone in front of me. "Here, look for yourself." On the screen was a photo of Hannah sitting on the back of a motorcycle, behind a man in a gray jacket. The shot was taken from a distance, but it was definitely my wife. Jessica spoke slowly. "I don't want to speak ill of my sister-in-law, but she was often out late and coming home early. Then money went missing from the house, and a few days later, she took Leo and disappeared." Michael kept his head down. I turned to him. "Mike, did you see Hannah take the money with your own eyes?" "No, I didn't." "Did anyone see her transfer the money?" "No." I turned to Jessica. "Was it cash or a bank transfer?" "From Mom's bank account." "Who was the recipient?" "Probably the man in the picture." "The account name?" She stammered. I don't remember." I looked at my mother. "Mom, did you check with the bank?" She snapped irritably. "It's as clear as day. What's there to check?" Hearing that, a chill went through me. I zoomed in on the picture. It had been cropped tightly. The front of the motorcycle wasn't visible, so it was unclear if anyone else was sitting in front, and there was no date or timestamp. After Hannah left, I asked, "Did any of you report it to the police?" My mother glanced at Jessica, who bit her lip. "It's a family matter. Calling the police would create a scandal. My wife took $18,000, took my son, and left with another man, and you call that just a family matter?" Jessica forced a smile. "I was just afraid of what the neighbors would say." I turned to Michael. "And you?" He rubbed his face. "Everything was so chaotic. I thought she'd just be gone for a few days and then come back." "How long has it been?" "Over a month," my mother replied. I closed my eyes. Over a month. No one had called me. No one had called the police. They had just continued living in this house as if nothing had happened. "Where's Hannah's phone?" I pressed on. Jessica answered. "She took it with her." "I can't reach her." "What if she changed her number?" "I've tried, can't get through." "Have her parents been told?" My mother turned away. "She hasn't gone to her family's place." "Then on what basis do all of you know she ran off with another man?" My mother's temper flared. "You just got home and you're interrogating your own mother like a criminal? I raised you for all these years. Do you think I'd make up stories to harm your wife?" I looked at the mother I had once trusted unconditionally, then at my brother with his head bowed, and my sister-in-law trying to maintain her composure. I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not saying you're lying, Mom. I just want to know the truth." Jessica sighed. "You've been away for so long, David. You don't understand how things are here. Some people look innocent, but who knows what's in their hearts?" I looked straight at her. "You're right. You can't judge a person's heart by their appearance." The room fell silent. I stood up and picked up my suitcases to go upstairs. My mother called out, "Where are you going?" "To my room, to put my things away." Jessica quickly interjected, "Your old room is being used for storage now, by me and Michael. You can sleep in the guest room upstairs for now." I stopped in my tracks. "The room that belonged to my wife and me, you're now using for storage?" She gave an awkward laugh. "It was just sitting empty, seemed like a waste." I didn't reply, my hand gripping the suitcase handle so tightly it hurt. The bracelet for Hannah was still in its box, Leo's model airplane still wrapped in paper. And in this house, built with the years I spent away from my wife and son, no one could tell me where they were. As I reached the top of the stairs, I knew that before I condemned the woman who had waited for me for nearly 7 years, I had to find out for myself who was lying. That night, I lay in the guest room at the end of the hall. The bedding was new, the air conditioner ran quietly, but I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Outside the window, the spring rain tapped gently on the roof tiles, each drop pulling me back to another morning. A morning in May 2019, before this mansion existed, when I was just a man nearing 30 with an old suitcase and a promise bigger than anything I owned. Back then, our house was a simple, one-story bungalow with a tile roof, sitting on a 1-acre lot next to the country lane. In the dry season, the front yard was covered in red dust that clung to your feet. In the rainy season, water would seep through the rotten window frames, and we had to stuff old towels in the cracks to keep the cold out. My father had passed away 3 years prior. While alive, he had divided his assets quite clearly. My older brother, Michael, got 5 acres of farmland and $32,000 to buy a small truck for hauling produce. The land with the old house, however, Dad had put in my name before I married Hannah. He had once called both of us to him and said slowly, "I'm not dividing it this way because I love one of you more than the other. Michael has a hauling business and needs capital and land to work. David studied HVAC and will need to build a house later. You're brothers. Once you've received your share, don't covet what the other has." Michael had nodded in agreement at the time. I never thought that piece of land would become the reason our family dynamics shifted. Only my mother wasn't entirely pleased. She often said it seemed strange for the family land to be in the youngest son's name. The eldest son is the one who takes care of the family traditions and holidays. While Dad was alive, he would just smile and tell her, "Don't force old customs on the kids. I've divided it fairly." After he passed, Mom stopped mentioning transferring the deed. But at every family gathering, she would still say that Michael, as the eldest, had to uphold the family's ways. I heard it but let it go, thinking she was just speaking out of old habit. The morning I left home, it wasn't raining heavily, just a damp mist covering the oak trees and the vegetable patch behind the house. Hannah had been up since 4 a.m. to cook a farewell meal. On the table were braised catfish, boiled sweet potato greens, a bowl of sour soup, and a plate of fried eggs for Leo. For years in Alaska, I could close my eyes and still remember the smell of black pepper mingling with wood smoke. Hannah placed a bowl of rice in front of me. "Eat up. You might not get used to the food over there." I smiled. "I'm going to work in HVAC, not a monastery. I'm sure I'll find rice." Hannah shot me a look. "If you knew how to take care of yourself, I wouldn't have to remind you. Remember before we were married, you ate instant noodles for 3 days straight, got a stomachache and tried to hide it?" Jessica laughed. "He won't cry until he sees the coffin. You're lucky to have a wife to nag you, David. Over there, you'll wish you could hear it." The atmosphere at the table was still light. Jessica put a piece of fish on my plate and said, "Remember to buy presents for the kids when you're in Alaska. Michael told me to come home if the work was too hard." My mother sat at the head of the table, sighing as she ate. "The family is peaceful and stable, and you insist on going so far away. How much money is ever enough?" I replied, "I'll only be gone a few years, Mom. I'll make some capital and come back. The house is leaking so badly. We have to brace the roof every storm season. I want to rebuild it so you, my wife, and my son can live properly." Mom shook her head. "If the roof leaks, you patch it. Why build something so big?" I glanced at Hannah. She just looked down, deboning fish for our son, not joining the conversation. I knew she didn't want me to argue with my mother right before I left. Leo, just under 1.5 at the time, couldn't speak clearly yet. He sat in his mother's lap, constantly reaching for the suitcase by the door, babbling Dada. I picked him up. He grabbed my shirt collar and grinned until his eyes disappeared. I turned to Hannah. "When I'm gone, if anything happens, you have to tell me. Don't hide everything." Hannah nodded faintly. "I know. If you need money, just say so." She let out a sad little laugh. "You haven't even left and you're lecturing me like an old man." I laughed too, but my heart was heavy. Hannah had to raise a young child while also caring for my mother. Leaving her behind wasn't easy. After the meal, I went into our room to check my documents. The small room barely fit a bed, a wooden wardrobe, and Hannah's sewing table. A damp patch stained a corner of the wall from last month's rain. I pointed to it. "Wait for me to come back. I'll build you a new room, with a window that looks out to the garden, so you won't have to put buckets out to catch the rain anymore." Hannah was folding my clothes into the suitcase. She said softly, "I don't need a big room. Just come home safely." I took her hand. "I'm not leaving to abandon you and our son. I'm leaving so that one day, our family won't have to bow our heads in poverty." Hannah looked at me for a long time. "I'm just afraid you'll be so busy taking care of everyone else that you'll forget to take care of yourself." I didn't fully understand what she meant then. It was only years later that I realized she was also afraid I'd be so burdened with responsibility for my mother and brother that I wouldn't notice my own wife and son being pushed aside. Before the car arrived, I called my mother into the living room. Mom, when I send money home, please hold on to it for me. A portion for my wife and son's living expenses, a portion for fixing the house. You manage it. Hannah is still young and has to raise a child. If there's anything she doesn't know, please guide her. My mother straightened my collar, her voice firm. Don't you worry. Go and focus on your work. Your wife and son are my family too. I won't let anyone bully them. I turned to Michael. Mike, you're here. If anything comes up, keep an eye on Hannah and Leo for me. He nodded. You just focus on your work over there. We're here. Jessica chimed in. Hannah's so sweet, who would bully her? After you leave, I'll help her look after Leo. Hearing this, Hannah just smiled. At that moment, no one thought a promise could be so easily made and so easily forgotten. The SUV arrived at the end of the lane around 7 a.m. I dragged my suitcase out. My mother followed, constantly reminding me to take care of my health. Michael helped carry a bag, and Jessica held Leo so Hannah could straighten my jacket. I hugged my mother first. I'm going now, Mom. Don't overwork yourself. She patted my back. Worry about yourself first. I shook Michael's hand. He smiled. If you can't make it over there, come back. We'll get by on whatever we have. I replied. If I come back too soon, Jessica will say I didn't even have time to get her a present. Jessica laughed. Just remember the present. That's all that matters. I'm not greedy for money. That was just a joke then. Later, I understood that greed doesn't always wear a ferocious face. Sometimes it starts with allowing oneself a small indulgence, then grows like weeds after a rain. Finally, I stood before Hannah. She was holding Leo, her eyes red, but she forced a smile. I stroked my son's cheek. Leo, be a good boy at home, listen to your mother, and wait for Daddy to come back and build you a really strong house. The boy didn't understand, just clung to my finger, refusing to let go. Hannah said, You should go, or you'll be late. I didn't move. She took a deep breath. We made this choice together, so we have to be strong. They say when husband and wife are united, they can drain the ocean dry. I'll be here waiting for you. I hugged them both. I believed that with hard work and regular remittances, that promise would come true. The car started to move. Through the window, I saw Hannah standing under the oak trees, one hand holding our son, the other wiping away tears. My mother stood beside her, and Michael and Jessica stood behind the wooden gate. I waved until the house was out of sight. That day, I left home with the belief that my wife and son were protected by my closest kin. I had no idea that my mother's words, "A daughter-in-law is also a daughter," would become the most painful, empty promise she ever made me. For the first 3 months in Alaska, I could barely tell Monday from Sunday. Before dawn, I'd ride my old bike from the boarding house to the cold storage maintenance facility. My job was to inspect compressors, replace pipes, clean cooling units, and crawl into freezers so cold my fingertips would go numb. After my shift, I'd stop by a diner run by a fellow American from the lower 48 and offer to fix their freezers, ice machines, or anything else the owner needed. The room I rented was barely over 100 square feet. A single bed, a folding table, and an old rice cooker were most of my possessions. Some days, I wouldn't get back to my room until nearly midnight, just in time to splash some soy sauce on cold rice and eat a quick meal. But every night, I tried to call home. Hannah would usually place the phone on a plastic stand next to her sewing machine. Behind her, I could hear the rhythmic clatter of the machine, while Leo sat on the floor, pushing a plastic car around. Daddy! Every time I heard him call, the exhaustion seemed to lift from my shoulders. I'd laugh. Leo, were you a good boy today? Hannah, threading a needle, would reply, Very good. He only spilled his entire bowl of oatmeal on me. I'd pretend to be stern. Leo, if you do that, Daddy's going to write it down, you hear? The little guy wouldn't understand, just giggle and press his face against the screen. Hannah would laugh too. Those laughs kept me going through the long days filled with nothing but work. From my first paycheck, I kept just enough for rent and food. The rest, I wired home to my mother. I called and told her, Mom, use that money to buy milk for Leo and fix the kitchen roof for me. It leaked so much last rainy season. My mother replied, You just got there. Keep it to take care of yourself. We can manage here. I insisted, I've already sent it, Mom. Just accept it. The money I make is to provide for the family. Every time I said that, Hannah would be quiet. It was only later I understood she didn't object to me providing for my mother, but she wanted me to send a portion directly to her and our son. At the time, I thought that, as family, it didn't matter if the money went to my mother or my wife. One night, Hannah asked very softly, "Can you send a little bit directly to me? For medicine and to save for Leo's school later on?" I was busy fixing a price quote and didn't look up. "If you need money, just ask Mom. I send everything to her to manage." She was quiet for a few seconds. I know. I heard the disappointment in her voice but paid it no mind. I even joked, "Mom is better at managing money than we are. If you had it, you'd spend it all on pretty fabric." Hannah forced a laugh. "Yes, I do love my fabric. At the time, I thought it was just a joke between us. I didn't know the woman back home was already having to ask for every single expense from the money her own husband was sending." After nearly 2 years, I had gained experience and made connections with more warehouse owners. A friend named Doug asked me to go into business with him, opening an HVAC maintenance company. There were just 3 of us, an old pickup truck, and a set of tools we bought secondhand. The day we got our first contract with a small supermarket, I stayed up almost all night checking every connection. Doug laughed. "You're too meticulous. The client's paying us to fix the machine, not for you to lose sleep." I replied, "Do a sloppy job once, and they'll remember it forever. Do a good job 10 times, and maybe they'll refer one new client." That slow and steady approach worked. From one supermarket, we expanded to food warehouses, restaurants, and then a chain of convenience stores. The company hired more technicians, bought new trucks, and started turning a profit. I sent more money home. Mom proudly told me she had replaced the kitchen roof, paved the yard, and bought a big new refrigerator. Jessica also started appearing in the calls, cheerfully saying, "David, you're amazing. Since you left, our lives have gotten so much easier." Hearing that spurred me on. But at the same time, my calls with Hannah grew shorter. At first, I called every night. Then, because of the time difference and increasing workload, it became 3 times a week. Some weeks, when I was on a remote job site, I could only call on Sunday nights. Every time the screen lit up, I'd see Hannah busy. Sometimes she was sewing, sometimes cleaning the kitchen, other times helping Leo with his writing. I'd ask, "Is everything okay at home?" She'd always reply, "Everything's fine, everyone's healthy." Once, I noticed her eyes were swollen. "Were you crying?" Hannah turned away to adjust the lamp. "Just smoke from the stove in my eyes." I believed her immediately, because my manager was calling non-stop about a delayed shipment. I just told her to get some rest and hung up. Another time, Hannah was about to say, "David, about the money in the house," when someone knocked on my office door. I cut her off. "I have a client right now. Let's talk this weekend." By the weekend, I had forgotten, and Hannah never brought it up again. The more successful I became, the more I thought I was doing the right thing. I bought an old house to fix up and sell, then invested in a few small warehouses. Counting my company shares in real estate, my assets grew to about $4 million. Friends advised me to buy a luxury car. I just laughed. As long as it runs, it's fine. I still have a whole family back home to support. But there was a hint of self-satisfaction in that statement that I didn't recognize. I still talked about my family as the goal of all my efforts, while the time I spent with them grew less and less. Leo grew up through a screen. The day he started first grade, Hannah sent me a video of him, in a white shirt and a blue backpack, standing in front of the school gate. I called and asked, "Are you scared?" Leo shook his head. "I'm not scared. When you come home, Dad, I'll take you to see my classroom." I promised, "I'll be home soon." But I didn't make it home that year. The next year, I said the company was expanding, and I needed to wait until things were more stable. Hannah didn't blame me, just reminded me, "You promised our son, so try to remember. Kids have long memories." I replied, "I know, I just have to finish this one project." One project led to another. Time slipped by. In early 2023, my mother called to say the old house was in serious disrepair. During the rainy season, water seeped through the roof, and a long crack had formed in the kitchen wall. I asked Hannah, "What do you think about rebuilding?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "If we can afford it, we should. But think it through, don't build too big. A house just big enough to live in is fine. I laughed. I've been gone almost 4 years just thinking about this. If we're going to build, let's do it right. A room for Mom, a place for my brother and his family, and space for you, me, and Leo, Hannah said. As long as the paperwork is clear and the finances are transparent, I have no objection. I didn't understand why she emphasized the word transparent. I even joked, it's our family home, not a corporation. You don't need to worry about an audit. Hannah didn't laugh. I sent the blueprints home, specifying that large payments should be made directly to the contractor. For living expenses and miscellaneous costs, I continued to deposit money into my mother's account. Mom said she wasn't comfortable with banking apps, so Jessica immediately volunteered. Just give me the phone, Mom. I'll handle it. The younger generation is faster with this tech stuff. Hearing this over the phone, I even happily thanked her. Thanks for helping Mom, Jessica. For any expenses, just take a picture of the receipt and send it to me. Jessica laughed. Don't you worry, David. We're family. Not a single penny will go missing. Her words sounded so light and reassuring at the time. I had no idea that when I handed over control of the final funds to my sister-in-law, I had also unwittingly given her the key to unlock the door to greed. The new house hadn't even had its first brick laid, but the distance between me and my waiting wife was already quietly being built, layer by layer. In May 2023, construction began with the sound of a concrete mixer churning from early morning and the smell of fresh cement filling the old yard. From Alaska, I could only watch the house grow through videos Hannah sent. But back home, she was the one standing under the hot sun, tracking every load of sand, every truck of bricks, and every payment to the workers. Hannah told me that on the day they poured the foundation, she woke up at 4 a.m. to cook a huge pot of beef stew. My mother had suggested hiring a caterer to save her the trouble, but Hannah refused. I can do it. The workers are here from morning till noon. A hot meal will give them strength. Jessica stood by and remarked with a smile. You're so resourceful, Hannah. When the house is finished and David comes back, he'll think we hired a house manager. Hannah didn't take it to heart, simply replying, It's our family home. We all do what we can. In the beginning, Jessica was genuinely helpful. She would call suppliers to check the price of steel, order floor tiles, and accept deliveries when Hannah was taking Leo to school. In the video calls, I often saw the two of them standing side by side, one holding a notebook, the other pointing at the blueprints. I was so reassured that I even said, with Jessica helping, I'm much less worried. Hannah just smiled. Yes, she's very enthusiastic. But as the house began to take shape on the second floor, that enthusiasm slowly morphed into a sense of authority. Jessica started making decisions on her own, choosing the paint color, changing the door designs, and instructing the workers to enlarge the front-facing bedroom. When Hannah questioned her, she said matter-of-factly, That room is for me and Michael. It needs a bigger window for more light. Hannah looked at the blueprints again. David designed that front room for us. Your room is across the hall. Jessica frowned. David isn't even here. And when you and Leo move to Alaska with him, the room will just be empty, collecting dust. David hasn't said he's taking us to Alaska. He might not have said it now, but he will. When people make good money over there, they don't come back to a small town to stare at cornfields. My mother, who was shelling peas nearby, chimed in. Your sister-in-law has a point. If you two are leaving eventually, it doesn't matter which room is which. Hannah didn't argue. She took a picture of the altered part of the blueprint and sent it to me. I was on a construction site that day, my phone battery almost dead. I glanced at it and texted back. Just let everyone decide on the rooms together. It doesn't matter where Michael and Jessica stay, as long as Mom is comfortable. That one casual reply left Hannah without any support in the argument. She later told me, At that moment, I knew if I protested anymore, everyone would call me selfish. I didn't realize it then. I thought I was being generous to my brother and his wife, but being generous with something that belonged to my own wife and son was a form of carelessness. By the end of 2023, the second floor's structure was complete. I sent new interior design plans, clearly marking 3 bedrooms. Mom's on the first floor for convenience, my and Hannah's room at the front of the second floor, and Leo's room next to it. Michael and his family would use the 2 rooms at the back. Jessica looked at the plans and smirked. David is so meticulous. He's been gone for almost 7 years. and he still reserves the best room for himself. Michael said, "It's his house. What's wrong with him arranging it this way?" She turned to her husband. "You make it sound so simple. Who's here taking care of his mother every day? He sends money and he's done. What about the cooking, the family gatherings, the sicknesses? Who handles all that?" Hannah, who was folding clothes at a nearby table, heard this and spoke up. "I'm still here with Mom. It's not just you and Michael." Jessica sneered. "You're here because your husband has a house here. The day he sends for you, will you come back to take care of his mother?" Hannah replied slowly. "That hasn't happened yet. Don't use it as an excuse to claim a share beforehand." The tension in the air was palpable. My mother slammed a basket down on the table. "It's just a few rooms, and you're all calculating like you're dividing an inheritance. The house isn't even finished, and you're already giving me a headache." Hannah fell silent first. Jessica stopped talking too. But from that day on, she no longer hid her intention of taking the front bedroom. In May 2024, I came home for 5 days to check on the construction. It was the only time I was physically present in nearly 7 years. But the time was too short, and my mind was consumed with contracts, paperwork, and online meetings. Hannah took me up to the second floor and pointed to the room at the front. "You intended this room for us, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, the window looks out onto the garden. You always liked that." Before she could say more, Jessica came up the stairs. "David, you're back just in time. I was thinking of using this room as a storeroom for my online business. The rooms in the back are quieter, more suitable for you when you come back." I looked between the two of them and laughed it off. "It's a small thing. Whoever needs it can use it for now. We'll figure it out when I move back for good." Hannah turned to me, her eyes not angry, just filled with disappointment. That night, she asked me, "Do you know why I wanted to keep that room? Because it's bigger? Because from the very beginning you said it was times our times room. I've stood in there so many times, imagining the day you'd come home and Leo would run over from his room to wake you up. I wasn't fighting for a room. I was fighting for a promise." I sat in silence. Hannah continued, "But never mind. You're only here for a few days. I don't want you to have to listen to family drama the moment you get back." I took her hand. "I'm sorry. I just thought they would only use it temporarily." Hannah didn't pull her hand away, but she said something that stayed with me for a long time. When people use something temporarily for too long, they eventually start to think it's theirs. Still, I didn't see the severity of the situation. I left after 5 days, continued sending money, and continued to believe that everyone would know their limits. By November 2024, the mansion was finished. On the housewarming day, Mom arranged an offering in the living room with a roasted chicken, green bean pie, sweet sticky rice cakes, and a vase of yellow chrysanthemums. Hannah wore a light blue dress and stood behind my mother. Leo ran around the yard, proudly telling everyone, "My dad built this house." Hearing that made me happy and sad at the same time. But right after the housewarming, Jessica moved her bed, wardrobe, clothes, and business inventory into the front bedroom. The adjacent room, originally intended for Leo, was also turned into a storage space for household goods. Hannah protested. "You already have 2 rooms in the back. Can you please leave our son's room for him?" Jessica crossed her arms. "A child can sleep with his mother. It's a waste to leave a room empty in a house this big." My mother added, "You and Leo can stay in the room at the end of the hall for now. When your husband comes back, you can rearrange things." The room at the end of the hall was small, with a window that faced the neighbor's wall, leaving it dark even during the day. Hannah looked at Leo, who was hugging a pillow with an airplane print, then at her mother-in-law. "I don't need a large room, but please give my son a proper place to study." My mother sighed. "You're always making a big deal out of nothing. A child can study anywhere." Hannah said no more. She set up a small desk by the door, bought a brighter light bulb, and hung a light-colored curtain to make the room less gloomy. From that day on, she started keeping more detailed records. Not just the cost of materials, but also who received deliveries, who changed the designs, and which items were purchased with which funds. She kept all the receipts in plastic sleeves, clearly marked with dates. One afternoon, Jessica walked into the room and saw the open ledger on the desk. She flipped through a few pages and asked, "Are you keeping books like an accountant? Who in this family are you planning to audit?" Hannah took the ledger back. "I'm not auditing anyone. This is the money David sent. I'm just keeping records so I can answer him if he asks. Jessica looked at her, the smile on her face thinning. Living with this kind of suspicion is exhausting. Hannah replied, It's because we're family that we need to be clear, so no one is wrongly accused. From the yard, Leo's voice called for his mom. Hannah closed the ledger and walked out, unaware that from that moment, what her sister-in-law wanted to take from her was not just a few pages of records, but the right to speak the truth itself. Only later, piecing together the stories from Hannah, Michael, and the few remaining text messages, did I understand that the greed in my family didn't erupt overnight. It started with hidden debts and grew into a trap that pushed my wife and son out of their own home. The person who started it all was Chris, Jessica's younger brother. Chris was 5 years younger than Jessica. In his youth, he was sharp and had even opened a cell phone store near the town square. At the grand opening, he had boasted, "From now on, if my brother-in-law or David need a phone, just come to me. Family price, international quality." Everyone had laughed. My mother even praised him for being business savvy. But the store was only popular for about a year. Instead of focusing on the business, Chris got hooked on online sports betting. It started with a few $100s per game, then escalated to thousands, and then tens of thousands. Whatever he lost, he thought he could win back. By early 2025, the store had closed. He told people he was pivoting his business strategy, but in reality, he had sold off most of his inventory to pay off debts. He didn't dare tell his parents, only turning to his sister. The first time, Jessica secretly gave him $3,000, telling Michael it was to buy inventory for her online business. A month later, Chris called again. "Jess, you have to save me. This is the last time, I swear. If I can get through this, I'll pay you back with interest. You said that last time. What if the loan sharks come to Mom and Dad's house?" But Jessica's heart softened. She sold a pair of gold earrings and gave him nearly $5,000 more. But a gambling addict never runs out of promises, only a place to stop. The more he was saved, the more Chris believed his sister would continue to save him. At the end of December 2025, he called close to midnight. Michael was already asleep, and Jessica was checking her orders. "Jess, this time, I'm really at the end of my rope." "How much?" $40,000. Jessica nearly dropped her phone. "Are you insane? Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? They have the title to my car, and they're threatening to come to the house. You brought this on yourself. You deal with it." Chris was silent for a few seconds, then his tone changed. "Remember when you married into a poor family, and I helped you out? Now you're living in a mansion, with David's money flowing into the account, and you're going to let me die?" That struck a nerve. The mansion wasn't in her name, and the money in the account wasn't hers, but living in that house, and being complimented by others on her good fortune for so long, she had begun to see that prosperity as something she was entitled to. She lowered her voice. "David's money is for the house. No one is supposed to touch it." Chris scoffed. "You're just borrowing it for a few days. He's in Alaska making money by the month. 40,000 is nothing to him. I'll get it back to you before anyone finds out." Jessica didn't agree immediately, but from that night on, she started paying close attention to the funds I had just transferred. In early May 2026, I sent $18,000 to my mother's account. It was the final payment for the kitchen cabinets, the iron gate, the curtains, and a few other pieces of furniture. I sent a message to the family group chat. "The money is in Mom's account. Hannah, as each item is finished, please make the payments and keep the receipts for me." My mother replied with a thumbs-up emoji. In reality, she didn't know how to use the banking app. For a long time, Jessica had been the one holding her phone and knew the passcode. That evening, Jessica said, "Mom, let me see your phone to check if the money arrived. The cabinet maker is getting impatient." My mother handed it over without suspicion. Michael was sitting and drinking tea and casually asked, "How much did David send?" $18,000. "Just make sure you use it for the right things and keep the receipts for him." Jessica laughed. "You make it sound like I'm a stranger." Michael said no more. He assumed his wife was just helping my mother with a few small transactions and never checked the app or asked for the receipts. That complacency would later cost him the peace of his own family. Late that night, when everyone was asleep, Jessica opened the banking app. She stared at the balance for a long time, then called Chris. I'm only sending it once. You have to pay it back in 2 weeks. I know you love me most, Jess. Don't say things like that. Just send me the account details. A few minutes later, $18,000 was transferred to Chris's account. In the transaction description, Jessica wrote, "Final payment for woodwork." She deleted the transaction alert message, cleared the notification from the screen, and placed the phone back in my mother's purse. She thought she had erased all traces, but the app still retained the complete transaction history. 2 days later, the gate installer called Hannah, saying he hadn't received the final payment. The curtain store also called, waiting for their payment. Hannah found this strange because I had told her the money had arrived. She asked my mother, "Mom, have we made any payments from the money David sent?" My mother replied, "How would I know? I left all that for Jessica to handle." Hannah turned to her sister-in-law. "Can you show me the list of expenses so I can check it against my ledger?" Jessica scowled. "Why are you asking so many questions? The due date isn't here yet, we can pay them later. The gate and curtain people just called. I'm afraid if we delay, they'll think we're unreliable. You worry about your sewing. Mom and I will handle the finances." Hannah didn't argue. That afternoon, however, my mother asked her to check the balance because the cabinet maker had called her directly. Mom handed her the phone while Jessica was out making a delivery. Hannah opened the banking app. She cross-referenced each transaction and then stopped at the one for $18,000. The recipient was Chris, and the description said payment for woodwork. But Hannah knew the woodworking company was owned by a man named John Baker. In her ledger, the remaining amount owed for woodwork was only a little over $4,000. Hannah took a screenshot with her own phone. She didn't call me right away, perhaps still hoping it was a mistaken transfer or something my mother had approved. That evening, as soon as Jessica returned, Hannah met her in the yard. "Jessica, I need to ask you something." "What is it? Why was the money for the house transferred to your brother Chris?" Jessica's face paled for a second, then she quickly regained her composure. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Hannah held up the screenshot. "This is the transaction history. $18,000 transferred to Chris's account, but the description says it's for woodwork." Jessica snatched the phone from Hannah's hand. "How dare you go through Mom's account? Mom asked me to check the balance." "In Mom's account? What right do you have to take a picture of it?" Hannah took her phone back, her voice calm. "This is the money David sent to finish the house. I'm not accusing you. I just want to know what the money was used for." Jessica stepped closer. "You think just because your husband makes money, this whole family has to report every penny to you?" "No one has to report to me. But the money can't just be transferred to your brother and we pretend nothing happened." Just then, Jessica's phone rang. The screen displayed Chris's name. She silenced it quickly. Hannah looked at her and said no more. It was that silence that made Jessica even more panicked. She knew Hannah had the screenshot, the ledger, and with just one call to Alaska, I would investigate all the finances. That night, Jessica stood in the hallway, peeking through the crack of Hannah's door. My wife was sitting at her desk, carefully clipping the transaction screenshot into her ledger. Jessica's phone vibrated again. A text from Chris appeared. "Find a way to keep this quiet. I've already spent most of the money." Jessica clenched her phone, her gaze fixed on the ledger in Hannah's hands. From that moment on, she was no longer thinking about how to return the money. She was thinking about how to turn the person who discovered the truth into the guilty party. 2 days after Hannah discovered the $18,000 had been transferred to Chris's account, Leo suddenly came down with a high fever. It was an early January afternoon, and the Ohio air was colder than usual. Hannah was taking a batch of altered clothes to the local workshop when the school principal called, reporting that Leo had a headache, a high fever, and had just thrown up in class. Hannah dropped the bag of clothes on a table and rushed to the school. The boy was curled up on a long bench in the nurse's office, his face flushed but his hands ice cold. "Mommy." Leo started crying the moment he saw her, his voice so weak it terrified Hannah. She carried him to the gate to call an Uber when Mark, the workshop manager, and another coworker, Sarah, rushed over. Sarah was the one who had brought the bag of clothes Hannah had left behind. Mark looked at the child. "Don't wait for a car. Get him in my truck. I'll take you to the clinic." Hannah hesitated. "I don't want to be a bother." "With a child this sick, there's no time for politeness," Sarah insisted. I'll come with you in case you need help. Leo was placed in the front passenger seat, and Sarah sat in the back to support Hannah. The doctor diagnosed him with strep throat and a high fever, requiring careful monitoring through the night. After getting the prescription filled, Sarah returned to the workshop. But since Mark lived in the same direction, he waited to drive them home. Leo was still in the front seat, clutching the bag of medicine. Just as the truck passed the end of their lane, Jessica was standing in front of the local convenience store. She saw all three of them, but didn't step out to ask about her nephew. Instead, Jessica stepped back under the store's awning, raised her phone, and took several pictures in quick succession. In the original photos, Leo was clearly visible in the front seat, the bag of medicine hanging from the gear shift. But that night, Jessica cropped the photo tightly, cutting out the front of the truck, the child, and the medicine bag. The remaining image showed only Hannah sitting behind a man. Later, when I saw the uncropped photo, I understood. Sometimes, all it takes to distort the truth is to cut out the part that allows it to be seen correctly. Leo was home from school the next day. Hannah stayed in the room to care for him, still holding on to the transaction screenshot and the ledger, planning to call me as soon as his fever broke. But Jessica didn't give her the chance. On the morning of the second day, just as the family finished breakfast, she suddenly screamed from my mother's room, "Mom, the money! It's all gone!" My mother rushed in, horrified. Michael came up from the yard. Jessica held up the phone, her face pale. "The $18,000 David sent is gone, all of it." Hannah, who was placing a cool cloth on Leo's forehead, heard the commotion and came out. "What money is missing?" Jessica whirled on her. "You have the nerve to ask? Besides you, who else touched Mom's phone?" Hannah immediately understood the trap being set. She held up the screenshot on her phone. "The money isn't missing. It was transferred to your brother Chris's account. I asked you about this." Jessica lunged for the phone, but Hannah stepped back. "Don't bother deleting it. I've saved another copy." My mother looked from one to the other. "What, Chris?" "Chris, Jessica's brother." Jessica burst into tears. "Mom, don't listen to her. She doctored that picture. She photoshopped my brother's name onto it to frame me." Hannah looked at her sister-in-law. "It's a direct screenshot from the banking app. If you want to know the truth, let's go to the bank and check." Jessica pointed a finger at her. "You're so eager to go to the bank because you want to cover your tracks, don't you? I'm the one demanding we check. How is that covering my tracks? Because you know who really received the money." With that, Jessica opened her phone and showed the cropped picture to my mother and Michael. "Here. The other day I saw her on the back of some man's motorcycle. The money disappears, and she's off meeting him. If she didn't transfer it, who did?" Hannah was stunned when she saw the picture. "That's Mark, from the workshop. Leo was sick that day. He and Sarah drove us to the clinic." Jessica sneered. "Where's Leo in this picture? You cut him out. I only took a picture of what I saw." Hannah turned to Michael. "Mike, you know Leo was sick that night. You even asked me if he was feeling better when I got home. Tell them, I wasn't alone with that man." Michael's lips moved, but no sound came out. I did ask about the boy." "Then tell them what you know." He glanced at his wife. Jessica's gaze was ice cold. A few days earlier, Michael had seen Chris's name pop up on his wife's phone. He could have demanded an explanation then, but instead, he bowed his head. "I didn't see it happen from the beginning." That answer pushed Hannah completely to the other side of the family. My mother took Jessica's phone, looked at the photo, and said, "Where there's smoke, there's fire. If you were living a respectable life, how could anyone take a picture like this?" Hannah's voice choked. "Mom, a cropped picture doesn't prove I'm having an affair, and a bank transaction with Chris's name on it can't be turned into my crime. You're still arguing?" "I'm not arguing. I'm defending my honor." "Your honor? While sitting on the back of another man's motorcycle?" "I was taking my sick child to the doctor. Sarah was there. The clinic has the records. We can call her or go to the bank and find out the truth right now." Every word Hannah said was clear and logical. But my mother only wanted a conclusion that fit her pre-existing fear that her daughter-in-law would eventually take her grandson away, and she would lose control of the house. Hearing this, Jessica cried even louder. "You want to drag the police and the bank into this, so the whole town knows this family has a daughter-in-law who stole money to run off with another man, is that it?" "I can't bear the shame, Mom." Hannah replied, "It's precisely because I didn't take it that we must call the police." She took out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff's department. They can check the transaction history on Mom's phone, the original photo, and question the people at the clinic. Whoever is at fault will be held accountable." Jessica lunged and grabbed her hand. "Put the phone down. Why are you so afraid?" "I'm not afraid. I just don't want this family's name to be dragged through the mud." Hannah looked straight at her. "A reputation isn't lost when the truth is investigated. It's lost when people in the family know what's right and still cover it up." My mother snatched the phone from Hannah's hand. "That's enough." She slammed it down on the table. "You are a daughter-in-law, an outsider. You come into this house, we give you a beautiful home to live in, and now you want to bring the police in to question every one of us?" Hannah's face went white. "I married David. I had his son. I took his place in caring for you for almost 7 years. How can you call me an outsider today?" My mother turned away. "If you're so innocent, then admit your mistake. Return the money, and we can still find a way to resolve this." "I didn't take it. How can I admit to something I didn't do?" "If you won't admit it, then get out of this house." From the bedroom, Leo coughed and then called out, "Mommy?" Hannah looked at her son, then turned back, her voice strangely calm. "Mom, I'm asking you to wait until David gets home. In front of my husband, we will go to the bank and check. If I took a single dollar, I will leave on my own." Jessica crossed her arms. "David's all the way in Alaska. How long are you going to drag this out?" "Until the truth is brought to light." Outside, the wind whipped through the oak trees. The first drops of rain began to hit the brick patio, growing heavier with each passing moment. My mother pointed to the door. "This house does not shelter people who bring shame upon it. If you won't confess, you leave tonight." Michael took half a step forward, but Jessica shot him a look, and he stopped. She walked straight into the room at the end of the hall. A moment later, she emerged carrying one of Hannah's bags of clothes. Hannah blocked the doorway. "You have no right to touch my and my son's things." Jessica didn't answer. She pushed past Hannah, opened the front door, and threw the bag hard onto the steps. The zipper burst, and several items of clothing fell out, immediately soaked by the rain. And I, at that moment, was over 8,000 miles away, completely unaware that the verdict for my wife had just been delivered, punctuated by the sound of rain beating down on the clothes she had carefully packed for my return. The canvas bag hit the steps and burst open. Hannah's blouses, a few of Leo's school uniforms, and a wool scarf I had sent home from Alaska, scattered in the rainwater. Hannah rushed out to gather them. She clutched the soaking wet items to her chest, but Jessica had already gone back into the room at the end of the hall, continuing to pull open drawers. Hannah ran back and held the door shut. Jessica shoved her hand away. "If you won't admit you're wrong, then take all your stuff and go. This house doesn't shelter someone who harms their own family. You have no right to kick us out. Mom already told you to leave. Why are you still standing here?" Hannah looked at my mother. Eleanor stood in the middle of the living room, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. She didn't throw the clothes out herself, but she did nothing to stop Jessica. Hannah tried to keep her voice steady. "Mom, I'm begging you one last time. Let's just wait for David to come home. The money in the account has a history. The photo has a witness. I'm not running from anything. I didn't take anything." My mother replied, "You keep bringing up David to try and scare me, don't you? I just want my husband to hear the truth. David is far away. How can he know what goes on in this house better than I do?" Hannah choked back a sob. "If you truly saw everything, Mom, you would know how I've lived for the past 7 years." My mother turned away. Jessica dragged Leo's backpack off its hook and threw it into the hallway. A few notebooks tumbled out, one sliding to a stop right at Michael's feet. Leo ran out from the room, still feverish, his face pale with fear. "My backpack!" He bent down to pick it up, but Jessica kicked it aside. "If you want it, go follow your mother and get it." Hannah pulled her son into her arms. "Don't take out your adult anger on a child." Jessica laughed coldly. "If you love your son, you wouldn't have given him the reputation of having a thief for a mother." Leo looked up at his mom. "You didn't take the money, did you, Mommy?" Hannah stroked his hair. "I didn't take anything. You have to remember that." "Then why are Grandma and Aunt Jessica kicking us out?" The question silenced the room. Michael bent down and picked up the notebook at his feet, but still said nothing. Hannah turned to him. Mike, you know the money has something to do with Chris. Can't you just say one fair thing for me and my son? Michael clutched the notebook, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Let's just clarify this slowly. You say slowly, while your wife is throwing my son's belongings out into the rain. Jessica snapped. If you defend her, I'm taking our 2 kids and going to my parents tonight. Michael squeezed the notebook in his hand, then simply placed it on a table and stepped back under the porch roof. Hannah looked at him, and perhaps in that moment, she understood that a man's silence can sometimes be colder than an insult. People say blood is thicker than water, but that night, a feverish nephew couldn't even get his own uncle to save one of his notebooks from the rain. Jessica brought out another bag of clothes. Hannah didn't fight anymore. She pulled a small suitcase from under the bed and packed her ID, a copy of Leo's birth certificate, their health insurance cards, fever medicine, and a few dry sets of clothes. The ledger she wrapped in a plastic bag and placed at the very bottom of her son's backpack. The phone with the transaction screenshot was in her coat pocket. My mother asked, "Where are you going with those documents?" "You told me to leave the house. I have to take our papers to rent a place and take care of my son." "So you're really leaving?" Hannah looked up, her eyes no longer pleading. "I asked to wait for my husband to return. You wouldn't agree. If I stay, it's only to be further humiliated in front of my son." My mother seemed to hesitate for a moment, but Jessica cut in. "Don't play the victim. Once you're gone, don't come back saying this family mistreated you." Hannah zipped up the suitcase. "I don't need to act. Tonight, the neighbors will see who's standing inside the house and who has to walk their child out into the rain." Enraged, Jessica lunged and snatched the phone from Hannah's hand. "Who are you calling? That man of yours to come pick you up?" "Give me back my phone!" Hannah grabbed one end, Jessica the other. The phone fell to the tile floor, the screen shattering and going dark. Leo was terrified. "Mommy's phone." Hannah picked it up, pressing the power button repeatedly, but it was dead. Jessica stood blocking her path. "It's broken, just throw it away. I'm sure you have plenty of people who will buy you a new one." Hannah didn't reply. She put the broken phone in her pocket and then put a raincoat on her son. While everyone was turned away, Jessica bent down, picked up the back cover of the phone that had fallen near the table, removed the SIM card, and slipped it into her own pocket. That small action proved her lies weren't spontaneous, but premeditated. The rain outside was coming down harder. Hannah pulled the suitcase toward the door, one hand holding Leo's. The boy suddenly pulled away and ran to hug my mother's legs. "Grandma, please let me and Mommy stay. Mommy didn't take the money. I can sleep in the kitchen, I don't mind." My mother looked down at her grandson. Her hand rose as if to pat his head, then stopped midair. Jessica stood behind her. "Don't go soft, Mom. If you let her stay, when David comes back, all the blame will fall on you." My mother pulled Leo over to the family altar and lowered her voice. "Leo, don't wait for your father anymore." The boy looked up. "Why not?" "Your father has a new wife in Alaska. He's living a happy life over there. He doesn't need you or your mother anymore." Leo stood frozen. Hannah immediately strode over. "Mom, why would you say that to a child?" "So he knows not to hope." "David never said that." "How would you know who he's living with over there?" "I trust my husband." Jessica sneered. "You trust him, yet he hasn't come home in almost 7 years?" Hannah didn't argue further. She knelt in front of her son. "Leo, look at me. What Grandma said, I have never heard your father say. Don't be so quick to believe it." Leo didn't cry. He looked at his mother, then at his grandmother. "Then why isn't he coming home?" Hannah fell silent. She could prove she didn't take the money. She could find a witness for the photograph. But she couldn't explain my nearly 7-year absence. My mother put her hands on her grandson's shoulders. "Stay here with Grandma. Let your mother go alone." Leo immediately backed away toward Hannah, clutching his backpack. "I'm going with my mom. You'll suffer if you go with her." "I won't let my mom go alone." The 8-year-old's words made every adult in the room unable to look him in the eye. Hannah bowed her head to my mother. "I'm leaving. When David comes home, please tell him that I didn't take the money, and I didn't run off with anyone." My mother was silent. Hannah turned to Michael. "Mike, I'm not asking you to defend me anymore. I just ask that you remember what you saw here tonight." Michael looked down. "Just let us know where you and the boy end up." Hannah gave a sad smile. "My phone was just broken." What am I supposed to let you know with? Jessica stepped forward and partially closed one of the front doors. Just go. Don't stand there talking about your misery. Hannah pulled the suitcase across the yard. The wheels got stuck in the cracks of the stone pavers, and she had to lift it. Leo, holding his backpack upside down, walked close to his mother. The wet clothes had been hastily stuffed into a plastic bag, and water dripped from it with every step. As they passed through the gate, my mother turned her back and walked inside. Michael stood motionless under the porch roof. And Jessica pulled the iron gate shut. The sound of the latch clicking into place was stark and dry in the rain. The country lane was pitch black. Hannah took off the only raincoat they had and draped it over her son, her own shoulders quickly becoming soaked. After a short distance, Leo suddenly stopped. "Mom?" The boy was gripping his backpack strap so hard his knuckles were white. "Is it true? Daddy doesn't need us anymore?" Hannah knelt and hugged him, rain streaming down her hair and face, making it impossible to tell where the rain ended and the tears began. She just said, "I don't believe Dad would abandon you, but from now on, you and I have to protect each other first." Then they started walking again, carrying their documents, the ledger, and a truth they hadn't had the chance to tell me. Behind them, the gate of the house I built was shut tight, as if there had never been a place for them at all. Later, every time Hannah recounted that night, I would feel a lump in my throat. While my wife and son were trudging through the rain, I was over 8,000 miles away, still believing everyone back home was safe and sound. Mrs. Gable was the first person to open her door for them. Her house was at the end of the lane, with an old crabapple tree in the front yard. Hearing the knock, she came to the door leaning on her cane. When she saw Hannah soaked to the bone and Leo shivering beside the small suitcase, she was horrified. "Good heavens, child. What on earth happened to you two?" Hannah could only manage to say, "Mrs. Gable, can we please stay here for just one night?" She didn't ask any more questions, just pulled them inside and gave them dry towels and old clothes for Hannah to change into. The wet clothes were hung to dry near the wood stove. Leo was still feverish, his face pale as he clutched his backpack. "Mrs. Gable felt his forehead. "Burning up like this, and they had the heart to throw you out?" Hannah looked down. "Please, I beg you, don't go over there and say anything right now. I just want my son to rest." Mrs. Gable cooked a small pot of chicken noodle soup, adding extra onions and a bit of ginger. Leo managed a few spoonfuls before lying down on the old wicker bed. Before he fell asleep, he asked, "Mommy, does Daddy know we were kicked out?" Hannah sat beside him, stroking his hair. "Not yet, but I will find a way to tell him." Her phone was broken. All my contact information was on that device, and she hadn't written down my new number in Alaska. Fortunately, she still remembered her old number, which I used for forwarding messages. She borrowed Mrs. Gable's phone and typed slowly. "David, come home and save us. Something terrible has happened. I didn't take the money. Don't believe what they tell you." At that moment in Alaska, it was nearly noon. I was with a client, inspecting the refrigeration system for a large food distribution center. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the unfamiliar number and was about to ignore it, but the first line mentioned me and our son, and I immediately opened it. I read it again and again, my hands turning cold. I stepped out of the machine room and immediately called the number that had just texted me. No one answered. I texted back, "Where are you? Is Leo okay? Call me right now." Back home, after sending the text, Hannah had turned off the phone and returned it to Mrs. Gable, not wanting to impose. She had no idea that Jessica had already taken the SIM card from her broken phone, put it into an old burner phone, and was waiting for the right moment. About 10 minutes later, I received a second text, this time from Hannah's own number. I was just angry and said some things I didn't mean. "Everything is fine, don't worry. I'm taking Leo to my parents for a few days." I read the two messages side by side and immediately sensed something was wrong. Hannah never dismissed serious matters as saying things I didn't mean. She also always used punctuation, unlike the run-on sentence in the second text. Most importantly, her mother had passed away years ago, and her only remaining family was a cousin who lived nearly 100 miles away. Hannah never referred to his place as her parents. I called my wife's number. It rang, but no one picked up. I called my mother. She answered after a long delay. "What's wrong? Why are you calling at this hour?" "Where's Hannah, Mom?" She paused for a beat, then replied. She got upset over a small family matter. Took Leo to her parents' place. Her phone. She said it was broken. I just got a text from her number. My mother sounded flustered. She probably borrowed someone's phone. I don't know. I lowered my voice. Mom put Hannah on the phone. She's already left. How am I supposed to do that? What happened? Just some women's squabble. You're busy with your work over there. Don't drop everything just because your wife says a few things. The more she talked, the stronger my sense of foreboding grew. I didn't argue. I just asked, "Is Leo okay?" My mother replied, "He's fine." Meanwhile, my son was lying with a fever on a wicker bed in Mrs. Gable's house. I hung up and called Michael. He didn't answer. I called Jessica. She answered immediately. "David, don't worry. Hannah's just feeling a little sensitive. She'll be back in a few days." I asked, "Why did she text me, 'Come home and save us'?" She gave a nervous laugh. When a husband and wife are apart for so long, women tend to overthink things. Maybe she just wanted you to come home sooner, so she exaggerated a bit. I didn't let on that I knew the text was fake. I just said, "Well, please keep an eye on Mom and Leo for me." That very afternoon, I handed off the rest of my work to my business partner, had our company lawyer handle the contract, and booked the earliest possible flight home. I didn't tell anyone in my family when I was arriving. I wanted to see everything with my own eyes before they had a chance to get their story straight. The next morning, Hannah took Leo to a small rental unit near the workshop. The room had only a metal bed frame, a wall-mounted fan, and a narrow kitchenette. Sarah lent them blankets, a rice cooker, and some money, but Hannah only accepted the household items. "I can manage the money," she said. "You've already done so much for us." During the day, Hannah helped with packing at the workshop. At night, she took in alteration work, sewing late into the night. Leo was still going to school, but had become very quiet. One day, his teacher called Hannah in because he had hit another student. The teacher, Miss Peterson, asked gently, "Leo, why did you hit your friend?" Leo looked down. He said, "My daddy left my mommy." Hearing this, Hannah was heartbroken. She didn't scold him, just put her arm around his shoulder. "You're not allowed to hit people, but you also don't need to be ashamed of what adults say." After that, Hannah, along with Mrs. Gable, went to see the head of the local women's association and the town mayor. She clearly explained that she had been falsely accused of taking money, kicked out of her home in the middle of the night, and that her phone had been broken. She didn't ask them to determine who took the money, only to officially record her statement in case of further threats. 3 days later, Chris showed up at her rental unit. He was wearing a leather jacket and parked his motorcycle to block the doorway. He placed a pre-written paper on the table. "Sign this. It says you left the house voluntarily because you misused funds. Sign it, and everyone will leave you alone." Hannah didn't touch the paper. "The money was transferred to your account." "What am I signing?" Chris sneered. "Let the adults handle the account details. All you need to know is not to make a scene. You should leave. I will only discuss this with my husband or the authorities present." He leaned against the doorframe. "If you want your kid to go to school in peace, don't be so stubborn. These country roads have a lot of traffic. You never know what might happen." Hannah was scared but didn't show it. She memorized his license plate number and said, "Get out of my house." Chris left the paper on the table. "Think it over carefully. You don't have another home to run back to." That afternoon, Hannah told Sarah what had happened. The landlord, worried about trouble, advised them to find another place. Sarah took them to an old storage shed owned by her aunt, located in a floodplain by the river. It had electricity, well water, a wooden bed, and a tin roof with many rusty spots. Hannah agreed to stay there. In return, she would look after the property and do sewing work for Sarah's aunt. Before leaving the rental unit, she stopped by Mrs. Gable's house and left her new address. "If David comes home, please tell him not to believe a word they say at the house. And please, give this address directly to him." Mrs. Gable took her hand. "Child, when you've been wronged, you have to hold on to the truth. Life may be slow, but karma never sleeps." Hannah nodded and then led Leo to Sarah's car. At that exact moment, at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, I was pulling my suitcase toward the security checkpoint, my mind consumed by 2 conflicting text messages and a question with no answer. "Ladies and gentlemen, if it were you, Receiving two completely different messages from your wife's number, would you believe your family, or would you immediately fly home to find the truth? Please leave your thoughts in the comments and continue listening, because the real secret still lies behind the doors of that mansion. After dinner, I didn't ask any more questions about Hannah and Leo. My mother kept piling food onto my plate, telling me to have more of the pot roast because it had been so long since I'd had a home-cooked meal. Jessica chattered about the newly paved country road and how property values by the river were soaring. Michael just drank his beer, occasionally adding a sentence or two. They were all trying to create the illusion of a normal family reunion, but the more normal they acted, the more abnormal it all felt. No one asked me how I planned to find my wife. No one mentioned the child who had been gone for over a month. My mother even said, "What's done is done. Don't think about it too much. Just rest for a few days, get your strength back, and then we'll figure things out." I put down my fork. Yeah, I am pretty tired. Jessica let out a barely audible sigh of relief. She thought I had bought their story. Around 10 p.m., the house grew quiet. I took my suitcase up to the guest room at the end of the hall. The room was clean but cold, with nothing to suggest the owners had been expecting my return. I opened the blue suitcase. The bracelet for Hannah was still in its velvet box. Leo's model airplane was still in its original packaging. If what my mother said was true, perhaps my wife had betrayed me. But what about my son? Why had no one looked for him? The toys, books, and shoes of an 8-year-old boy couldn't just vanish from a house without raising any questions. I stepped out into the hallway. The door to the room that had been designed for my wife and me was slightly ajar. Inside, it was crammed with boxes of Jessica's online inventory, her clothes, and a large vanity table. On the wall, I could see 2 small nail holes, right where I had told the builders to hang our wedding portrait. The picture was gone. The wardrobe I had chosen had also been replaced with a new one belonging to my brother and his wife. I opened a low drawer. Inside were only sales receipts and some junk, no sign of Hannah's clothes. I went to the small room at the end of the hall, the one my mother said my wife and son had stayed in temporarily. Inside was just a single bed frame, a small student desk, and some empty cardboard boxes. The mattress was rolled up and leaning against the wall. On a corner of the desk was a blue ink stain and a few pencil marks. The room was empty. Under the bed, pushed deep into a corner, was an old cookie tin. I pulled it out. Inside were a few school merit badges, a broken plastic toy car, and several children's drawings. The one on top showed 3 people holding hands in front of a house with a red roof. The man wore a blue shirt, the woman a yellow dress, and the child was holding an airplane. At the top, in a child's shaky handwriting, Leo had written, "Waiting for Daddy to come home." In the bottom right corner, he had dated it the 15th of December 2025. I stared at the date for a long time. Just over a month before he was kicked out, my son was still drawing our family of 3. A child who believed his father had abandoned him wouldn't write something like that. Beneath the drawing was an unsealed envelope addressed to Dad. I opened it. "Dear Dad, are you coming home for my birthday this year? I'm big now. I don't need a lot of presents. Aunt Jessica said the big room has to be for storage, so I can sleep with Mom. When you come home, you can sleep next to me for one night. I want to hear you tell me stories about airplanes, for real, not on the phone." I had to sit down on the empty bed frame. In our last call, Leo had only asked when I was coming home. I had given him the usual answer: as soon as I finish my work. He hadn't told me about the room being taken, probably because he didn't want to worry me. Hannah hadn't said anything either. The 2 of them had been hiding their hardships together, and I had mistaken their silence for peace. I folded the letter and put it in my inside pocket. I had thought I was keeping up with my son through short video clips. But sitting in that room, I realized that remembering a child isn't just about watching him grow. It's about knowing where he sleeps, what he's afraid of, who makes him sad, and how he's waiting for you. I had missed so much, and I had used the money I sent home as a way to console myself that I was still a responsible father. Behind the desk leg was a fish-shaped keychain I had sent to Hannah. One of the fins was broken, but I still recognized it. Hannah hadn't taken all her things with her, as Jessica had claimed. She had left in a hurry. I went down to the backyard. Under the covered patio, the white scooter I had bought for Hannah was parked next to Jessica's. I recognized the license plate. A grocery bag was hanging from the handlebars. In the storage compartment was my sister-in-law's raincoat. If Hannah had planned to run away with another man, why would she leave behind her transportation, her wedding photo, and her belongings? A door opened upstairs. Jessica looked down. "You're still up, David?" "Just getting a glass of water." She came down a few steps. "It's a cold night. You should get some sleep. I'll make you a big breakfast in the morning." I pointed to the scooter. "That's Hannah's, isn't it?" She paused, then laughed. "She's gone. It was just sitting there, so I use it to run to the store." "Did she say you could?" "We're family. We don't need a written contract to borrow things." I nodded. "Right. Family." I said it so softly she must have thought I didn't care, and she went back up to her room. Around midnight, I called Hannah's number again. A ringtone sounded from the front room down the hall. I stood perfectly still. The sound was muffled by the wooden wardrobe, but it was unmistakably a phone ringing. When the call went to voicemail, the house fell silent again. I called a second time. The wardrobe in Jessica's room vibrated again. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, stood in the hallway, and let it capture the sound of the ringtone along with the time of the call. I also recorded my screen, showing Hannah's number being dialed. I didn't bang on their door. I didn't confront her in the middle of the night. If the SIM card really was in that wardrobe, the slightest hint of suspicion would be enough for her to toss it in the river before morning. I had handled many tense negotiations in my business, but never had I had to calculate every move with my own family. The feeling was both bitter and terrifying. I went back to my room, locked the door, and organized what I knew. My wife hadn't taken her scooter or most of her belongings. My son was still waiting for me right before he disappeared. The affair photo was suspiciously cropped. Hannah's phone number was active inside Jessica's room, and the entire family had failed to report the stolen money to the police. These clues weren't enough to prove who was the mastermind, but they were enough to prove that the story I had been told was full of holes. The next morning, I went downstairs and acted as if nothing was wrong. Jessica was setting the table for breakfast. My mother asked if I had slept well. I replied, "I slept okay. I think in a few days, I need to start making some new plans for this house." Jessica, in the middle of pouring gravy, looked up. "What kind of plans?" I said casually, "I have a house in Alaska that I'm thinking of selling. If I can sell it, I'll send back about another $200,000 to fix up the yard, redo the gate, and buy new furniture." Her hand froze mid-air. "200,000? It's just an idea for now." She pulled a chair closer. "When are you selling? Will the money be transferred to Mom's account like before? Or maybe you should invest in the lot behind us. Land prices around here are going up like crazy." Michael looked at his wife. "He just got back and you're already asking about his money." She gave a nervous laugh. "I was just trying to help him think of ideas." I took a bite of sausage and said slowly, "You have a point, though. Money sent back needs to be managed by someone really trustworthy." Her eyes lit up. I looked down at my plate to hide the coldness in my own eyes. The ringing phone in the wardrobe, the unreported theft, and her overly eager reaction to the promise of another $200,000 had all connected into a straight line. At that moment, I still didn't know where my wife and son were, but I was certain their disappearance hadn't started with an affair. It had started with greed, right inside this very house. That morning, after leaving the breakfast table, I took the car keys and told my mother I was going to visit a few old friends. Jessica asked where I was going. I just smiled. "I've been gone for almost 7 years. Just want to drive around and see how the old neighborhood has changed." She looked at me a little longer than usual but couldn't stop me from leaving. I drove slowly along the river road. The diner at the edge of town was still there, but the people inside either turned away or gave me a curt nod when they saw me. The pity in their eyes only confirmed my suspicion that Hannah's story had been gossiped about all over town. I stopped in front of Mrs. Gable's house. She was sitting on her porch, sorting vegetables in a wicker basket. As soon as she saw me, she used her hands to push herself up. "They told you your wife ran off with another man, didn't they?" she asked without preamble. I froze. That one question was enough to tell me that the accusation had been carefully prepared and repeated so often that even outsiders knew what I would be told upon my return. "I'm back, Mrs. Gable. Please, if you know anything, tell me everything." Mrs. Gable looked down the lane, closed her gate, and then pulled a chair out for me. "I don't know the specifics about the money," she said. but I know about the night Hannah and the boy were kicked out. Which night? The night of January 13th. It was raining hard. Around 10 p.m., she brought Leo over here. They were soaked, like they'd just been pulled from the river. Who kicked them out? Your mother made the order. That Jessica woman threw their things out, and your brother Michael just stood there and watched. I turned to look at the crabapple tree in her yard. Her words lined up perfectly with the empty room, the scooter, and the unsent letter. But hearing it directly still felt like a punch to the gut. Mrs. Gable continued, telling me how Hannah had only asked for one night, how Leo had a fever and she had to make him soup and dry their clothes, and how Hannah had borrowed her phone to send me that one desperate text message. I pulled out my phone and showed her the message. Was it this one? She looked at it and nodded. That's the one. She typed it with her own hands. She also told me that if you came back, I should tell you not to believe a word they said at the house. Where did she go after that? She rented a room near the workshop. But she wasn't there long. Some man came and started pressuring her. She was scared for the boy, so she moved again. I asked about what my mother had told Leo. Mrs. Gable fell silent, her eyes turning red. I didn't hear it with my own ears at your house. But that night, the little boy asked his mother, "Is it true Daddy has a new wife?" He asked it over and over, like someone had hammered a nail into his head. I bowed my head. My mother hadn't just lied to me about my wife. She had used my own absence to make my son believe his father had abandoned him. Mrs. Gable went inside and came back with a folded piece of paper. This is the address of the first rental. The place after that, all I know is it's somewhere in the floodplains. Before I left, she said, that Hannah, she endured all that not because she's weak, but because she was afraid of distracting you while you were so far away. But when a woman endures for too long, others start to think she can't feel pain. The old rental unit was behind a row of convenience stores near the town center. The landlord was wary at first, but when I showed him my ID and explained I was Hannah's husband, he opened up. She checked out almost a month ago, rented the smallest room, but she kept it clean. The boy would come home from school and just stay inside, didn't play much with the other kids around here. Why did she move? There was a man who came by on a motorcycle a few times. Didn't hurt anyone, but he'd stand at her door talking for a long time. After the last time, she asked to check out that same day. Do you remember what he looked like? Black motorcycle, Ohio plates. Man in his 30s, wore a big ring. The description sounded a lot like Chris from the family photos I had seen. The landlord didn't know where Hannah had moved, only that a woman from her workshop had come to pick her up. I went next to Leo's elementary school. Miss Peterson, his teacher, verified my information and then invited me into her office. Have you seen your son yet? She asked. I shook my head. Then you should prepare yourself. Leo has changed a lot in the last month. She pulled out a folder of student essays. The one from my son was titled The Person I Miss the Most. His handwriting was still clumsy, with a few erased words. I read it slowly. My dad lives in Alaska. Grandma said my dad has a new wife, so I shouldn't wait for him anymore. But my mom is still waiting. I want to wait too, but I'm scared to make my mom sad, so I don't ask. I couldn't read any further. Outside the window, a few children were playing kickball, their laughter echoing in the sunshine. I thought about how my own son used to run around that same playground, before the adults had planted a needless fear in his heart. Miss Peterson said softly. Once, a classmate teased him about not having a father, and he hit the boy. When I asked him why, he just said, I don't want anyone to say my mom was left behind. He's not an aggressive child. He's just trying to protect his mother in the only way a child knows how. I asked her if she knew where they were. Hannah asked me to keep it confidential. She said someone was following them. All I know is she's still trying to make sure he attends school regularly. He's been absent the last few days, and I haven't been able to reach her. I asked for a photo of the essay. She agreed, but reminded me not to use it to put more pressure on Leo. From the school, I drove straight to the workshop. Mark, the manager, was checking inventory. When I mentioned Hannah's name, he looked at me with suspicion. I'm her husband, David Miller. Mark put down his clipboard. Now that you're back, you should find your wife and son before you listen to anyone else's stories. I showed him the cropped picture from Jessica. He glanced at it and gave a bitter laugh. This photo has been doctored. He called over Sarah, the other coworker. Sarah confirmed that on that day, Leo had a high fever, and she and Mark had taken them to the clinic. Since she had to return to the workshop, Mark, who lived in the same direction, had driven them home. The boy was sitting in the front seat, Sarah said. The bag of medicine was hanging from the gear shift. I even told Hannah to remember to give him a lukewarm bath when she got home. Mark pulled out his phone and found a picture another worker had taken as they were leaving the workshop. In the photo, Sarah, Hannah, and Leo were all present. The timestamp matched the day on the cropped photo. Sarah even had a copy of the clinic receipt that Hannah had asked her to hold on to. Patient name: Leo Miller. Time of visit: 5:10 p.m. Diagnosis: strep throat and high fever. I placed the two photos side by side. Jessica's photo had cut out the exact elements that could have saved my wife's reputation. Do you know where Hannah is now? I asked. Sarah hesitated. I didn't push, just showed her the desperate text message and the photo of Leo's essay. After a moment, she said, I don't know the exact route. It's an old storage shed my aunt owns, in the floodplain at the edge of town. From the main road, you have to cross a small concrete bridge and then follow the riverbank. The road gets pretty muddy when it rains. She described a large cottonwood tree, a field of corn, and a faded green tin roof. I thanked them and left immediately. The sky to the west was already dark with clouds. As my car reached the dirt road leading down to the floodplain, the rain suddenly started pouring, turning the path into a slick, muddy track. I had to pull over and continue on foot with an umbrella. In my pocket were my son's unsent letter, the photo of his essay, and the address from Mrs. Gable. The affair photo had crumbled, and the lie about my wife leaving voluntarily no longer held up. But I hadn't seen Hannah, hadn't seen Leo, so I couldn't yet breathe a sigh of relief. I walked faster through the rain, heading toward the low tin roof just visible at the end of the path, where the most painful answer I would ever have to face might be waiting. I walked another 200 yards before the wind nearly tore the umbrella from my hands. The dirt path was slick, my feet sinking into the mud with every step. At the end of the trail, a faded tin roof emerged from behind a stand of banana trees. The building was nothing more than an old tool shed. On the porch, a makeshift stove of 3 stones smoked, the fire struggling with the damp wood. I saw Hannah first. She was squatting by the stove, fanning the flames with a piece of cardboard in one hand, shielding the fire with the other. Her hair was hastily tied back, a few strands stuck to her cheek. Her brown sweater was frayed at the elbows. She was so thin that I had to stop and stare to be sure it was my wife. Under the eaves, Leo sat on a low plastic stool, trying to fix a broken strap on his sandal with a piece of string. Next to him was his faded blue backpack. I called out softly, Leo. The boy's hands stopped moving. Hannah whipped her head around, the cardboard fan falling to the ground. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Just stared at me as if I were a ghost from a dream she no longer dared to believe in. I took another step forward. Hannah, I'm home. Leo looked up. His face was mine, but his eyes were those of a complete stranger. He scrambled backward, hiding behind his mother. I crouched down. Leo. It's Dad. The boy pressed himself against Hannah's back, his hands balled up in her shirt. You're not my dad. Those 4 words rooted me to the spot. I had imagined he would be surprised, that he would cry, or run into my arms. I had never imagined that the child I had missed for nearly 7 years would look at me like a stranger to be feared. I'm David Miller. I'm your dad. I just flew back from Alaska. Leo shook his head. Grandma said you have a new wife. She said you don't need me and Mom anymore. Hannah placed a hand on his shoulder. I knew I was the one who had to explain. I took out my phone and played a video of Leo singing Happy Birthday to me. In the video, he was only 5, clapping his hands and lisping, When you come home, Daddy, I'll let you sleep with me. I held the screen out to him. Do you remember this? Leo watched for a few seconds, then turned away. Anyone can make a video. I took the model airplane out of its waterproof bag. You asked me to buy this for you. Leo looked at the toy, his eyes flickering with a hint of recognition, but he didn't move toward it. Someone could have given it to you, but I'm not calling you Dad. Hannah finally spoke. David, get out of the rain. Her voice was chillingly calm. She just nudged a stool over so I could stand under the awning. I stepped onto the porch. A wooden bed was pushed against one wall. An old table served as a study desk. In the corner was a small sewing machine and a pile of unfinished work. On a low shelf were a few packets of instant noodles, a bottle of soy sauce, and Leo's medicine. The sight of it all made the 2 suitcases of gifts I'd brought seem meaningless. "How long have you two been living here?" I asked. Hannah bent down to pick up the fan. "Long enough for Leo to get used to the sound of rain dripping into buckets." Under a leak in the roof, 3 plastic basins were set out to catch the water. My voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry." Hannah didn't look at me. "What are you sorry for?" "Everything." She gave a faint, humorless smile. "The word everything is too big, David. So big that the person hearing it doesn't know which part you're actually sorry for." I spoke slowly. "I'm sorry for being gone too long. I'm sorry for sending money and thinking that was enough. I'm sorry that every time you tried to talk, I told you we'd do it later. And I'm sorry for letting other people speak to my wife and son on my behalf." Hannah was silent. Leo looked at me and then suddenly asked, "Are you only here to take me back?" I was taken aback. "No, I'm here to take both you and your mom back. Grandma said if you came back, you would only want me." She said Mom isn't family. I knelt to be at his eye level. "Listen to me. Your mother is my wife. You are my son. I came to find both of you." Leo looked me straight in the eye. "If Grandma cries, will you leave Mom behind?" The question was so direct, there was nowhere for me to hide. "I was wrong before," I said, "because I thought adults always did the right thing. From now on, I will see for myself, listen for myself, and I will be responsible. No one will ever make me leave your mother." The boy bit his lip. "Adults make promises, and then forget." I nodded. "You're right. I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I will show you." Leo didn't answer, just turned and wrapped his arms around his mother's waist. I looked at Hannah. "Let me get you two out of here first. Leo is still coughing and the roof is leaking." Hannah asked, "Back to the mansion?" "No. I'll rent a place. My family. I haven't told any of them I've found you." Hannah looked at me for a long time. I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes, quickly followed by caution. She was probably wondering if I was truly clear-headed or just acting out of shock and guilt. "I am not going back to that house," she said. "I understand." "No, you don't understand yet." Hannah pointed to Leo's backpack. "Some of his notebooks that were thrown in the rain are still in there. The ink on some pages was so smeared he had to copy them over. Every night, he sleeps with that backpack right next to him because he's afraid someone will take it and throw it out again." "How are you going to get him to sleep peacefully in that house?" I couldn't answer. Hannah continued, "I believed you didn't have another woman. I've always believed that. But I can't yet trust that the next time your mother cries, or your brother says things are complicated, or your sister-in-law plays the victim, that you will still stand up for what's right." "I'll prove it," I said. "I don't need you to prove it by making a scene, kicking people out, or throwing their things on the street. I was treated that way. I don't want my son to see his father become like them." I nodded. "I won't use violence. Don't make a lot of promises. Just do one thing at a time." I bowed my head. I used to think that promises were a way to reassure my family, but at that moment, I realized that a promise repeated too many times without being kept becomes a debt, and the person who has to listen pays the interest in disappointment. The rain began to let up. I placed the model airplane on the plastic stool. "I'll leave this here. You can open it whenever you want." Leo still didn't touch it, but he did pull the stool closer to a dry spot, as if to protect the toy from the rain. That small gesture told me that he remembered his request from years ago. He just wasn't ready to accept the person who brought it back. "Has Leo been back to the doctor?" I asked. "No, I just refilled his old prescription. Let me take him. After that, I'll rent an apartment near his school. You can have the keys, choose the rooms yourself. I won't force you to stay with me if you don't want to." Hannah was silent for a moment, then asked her son, "Leo, do you want to go to the doctor?" The boy shook his head. "I don't want to go with him." "Your mom will be with you," I said. "I'll just drive." Leo looked up at his mother. Hannah gave a slight nod. He reluctantly agreed. "As long as I can sit with Mom." I started to help with their bags. Leo immediately clutched his backpack to his chest. "I can carry this myself." I stopped. "Okay, you carry it." Hannah gathered their medicine, clothes, and the ledger wrapped in plastic. I only carried the sewing machine and a box of her work, not touching any of my son's things. As we were about to leave for the car, Leo stood under the awning, watching the rain. He turned to me, still keeping his distance. Do you have an umbrella? I held up the one I was carrying. Yes. He pointed to my soaked shoulder. Then you should use it. My mom and I have a raincoat. I opened the umbrella and walked behind them on the muddy path. Hannah didn't wait for me to walk beside her. Our reunion had no joyful shouts or warm embraces. Just 3 people, walking in the same direction, but still a few steps apart. I knew that finding my wife and son was just the end of the search. To make them truly believe I had come home for good, I would have to walk a much longer road. I rented a small apartment near Leo's elementary school, on the 3rd floor of a newly constructed building. It wasn't luxurious, but it had 2 bedrooms, a bright kitchen, and a balcony that looked out onto a street lined with crepe myrtle trees. I chose it because it had a 2-4-hour security guard, cameras at the gate, and was only a 10-minute walk from the school. I gave the keys to Hannah first. You keep both sets. I'll stay at a hotel nearby. I won't come over unless you feel safe. Hannah took them but didn't say thank you. She checked every window, the locks, the fire escape, and only then did she set down her bags. Her cautious actions hurt me more than any angry words could have. When Hannah first came to my family's home, her only thoughts were about where to set up the kitchen and her sewing machine. Now, the first thing she looked for was the exit. Leo chose the smaller bedroom. He placed his backpack right beside his pillow, the model airplane still in its paper bag. I asked, "Do you want me to install a bookshelf?" He shook his head. Not yet. I didn't press. I went out to buy some essentials. But before paying for anything, I texted Hannah. From the rice cooker, to the kettle, to the blankets and pillows, I let her choose. I didn't want money to become another way of giving orders. The first night, I brought over chicken soup. Leo ate sitting next to his mother while I sat on a chair near the door. Hannah said, "You don't have to bring food every day. I can manage." I know. I just want him to eat something hot. Leo looked up. Aren't you eating? I was surprised but kept my voice steady. I already ate. He was quiet for a moment, then pushed a small bowl toward me. There's still a lot. You can have some too. I took the bowl and ate a few spoonfuls of the now lukewarm soup. It was a small gesture, but to me, at that moment, it was worth more than any big contract I had ever signed. The next morning, Hannah pulled a ledger, wrapped in 2 layers of plastic, from the bottom of a bag. The cover was warped, the pages yellowed from dampness. She placed it on the table along with her broken phone, copies of their documents, and the statement from the Women's Association. This is everything I have left. I opened the ledger. Every expense was clearly recorded with the date, recipient, item, invoice number, and outstanding balance. Some pages were water-stained, but the writing was still legible. I turned to the entry for the $18,000. Beside it, Hannah had written in red ink, the 8th of May 2026. Discovered transfer to Chris's account. Purpose unknown. Question Jessica. No explanation given. You were going to call me that day, weren't you? I asked. Hannah replied, yes, but then Leo got sick, and everything happened so fast after that. She added the transaction screenshot and the letter from the Women's Association to the pile. The letter clearly stated the date Hannah had come to report being kicked out of her home, her broken phone, her sick child, and that she was being pressured to sign a confession. The more I read, the heavier my heart grew. You did more than I ever could have imagined. Hannah looked at me. Did you think I would just cry and run away? I shook my head. I had no right to think that. She sat down across from me. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because staying there was no longer safe for Leo. If I had fought back, Jessica might have hurt him. If I had called the police without having my phone as evidence, they would have dismissed it as a family dispute that needed mediation. I had to protect our documents, the ledger, and my son first. I nodded. Every word she said showed me that during my absence, the wife I had once viewed as dependent had been forced to do everything her husband should have done. I want to bring you and our son back home, I said. Hannah looked me straight in the eye. I am not going back to that mansion. I'll have my brother and his wife move out. Just because they leave doesn't mean the house goes back to the way it was. I fell silent. Hannah continued. In that place, my son's clothes were thrown in the rain. His school books were stepped on. Your mother pulled him aside and told him his father had a new wife. Do you think just by changing the locks and buying a new bed, Leo will be able to sleep peacefully there? I bowed my head. I understand. You're just beginning to understand. She was right. I was used to solving problems with money, documents, and property rights. But a child's fear couldn't be fixed by repainting a wall. Hannah placed her hands on the table. If you want us to have a chance, I have 3 conditions. I sat up straight. Tell me. First, my reputation must be restored, publicly. Not with your mother apologizing to me behind closed doors while the whole town still thinks I stole money and ran off with another man. Everyone who heard the lie needs to hear the truth. I nodded. I agree. Second, the money in the house must be handled legally. I will not accept you coming back and using your money or your ownership of the land to kick everyone out on the street. I was treated that way, and I will not become someone who does the same thing. I'll talk to a lawyer. Third, Leo is not to be present during any confrontations. No one is to force him to choose between his parents, his grandmother, or his uncle. This is an adult problem, and it stays with the adults. I answered immediately. I promise. Hannah looked at me, her voice slowing. Don't promise out of habit. Think about it, then speak. I took a deep breath. I agree to all 3 conditions. Not so that you'll forgive me immediately, but because it's the right thing to do. Hannah didn't smile, but the tension in her face eased slightly. That afternoon, I took Leo to the county hospital for a checkup. The results showed the fever was gone, but he still had a mild throat infection. He was underweight and sleep-deprived. The doctor recommended psychological monitoring, as he was showing signs of prolonged anxiety. I talked to Hannah about finding a child psychologist. She agreed but warned me, don't tell him he has a problem. He's just scared. The first session was in a small room with toys and art supplies. The therapist invited all 3 of us in, but Leo pulled his chair close to his mother, leaving a large empty space between us. The therapist asked, "Who in this room makes you feel the safest?" Leo pointed to Hannah. "And who is this?" she asked, gesturing to me. He replied, "He's my dad, I think." I was hurt but didn't interrupt. She asked, "Would you like your dad to sit closer?" Leo shook his head. He's fine where he is. Throughout the session, he drew a house with 2 doors. At one door, he and his mother stood inside. At the other, a man stood outside. When asked why the man wasn't allowed in, Leo answered, "I have to see if he's going to leave again." On the way home, I didn't ask him what he talked about. I just opened the car door so he could sit with his mother in the back seat. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him fall asleep, his head resting on Hannah's shoulder. I suddenly understood that a child doesn't need to hear more promises. He needs to see adults keep their word, day after ordinary day. When we got back to the apartment, Hannah carried the bag of medicine, and I carried the medical records. Leo walked behind us. As we reached the 2nd flight of stairs, he unexpectedly took hold of my pinky finger. I stopped. His small hand was a little cold. He didn't look at me, just said, "The stairs are slippery." "Okay, I'll walk slowly." He didn't correct my use of I instead of dad, and he didn't let go right away. We walked up the stairs together. Only when we reached the apartment door did Leo pull his hand back and run to stand beside his mother, as if he was afraid of having revealed something. I didn't call him back. I just stood there as the door closed slowly and understood that my wife and son's trust wasn't lost in a day, so it couldn't be regained with a single apology. But that brief touch told me the door to my son's heart wasn't completely shut. The rest was up to me, to live in a way that he would never feel the need to lock it again. The next morning, I drove to Columbus to meet with a lawyer, Mr. David Chen. He was about 10 years my senior, calm and deliberate in his speech. I laid out everything on his conference table: the deed to the land, the wire transfer records, the photos, Hannah's ledger, and the statement from the Women's Association. He reviewed everything for a long time, then asked, "What is your primary objective?" "I want to bring my wife and son home, clear up the issue with the money, and hold the person who slandered my wife accountable. As for the house, the land is in my name, and I sent most of the money for construction." The lawyer set the file down. "Mr. Miller, what you just said may be partially true, but it's not the complete picture." He pointed to the land deed. "This land was gifted to you by your father before your marriage, which gives it grounds to be considered separate property. However, the house itself was built during your marriage. The income you generated in Alaska while married to Mrs. Miller is not automatically your separate property just because you earned it. I retorted, but I was working in Alaska. The money came from my bank account. He asked, during those nearly 7 years, who raised your son? Who cared for your mother? Who supervised the construction? Who held your family together so you could work with peace of mind? I had no answer. He continued, people often talk about the contributions of a working spouse and a homemaking spouse. The law doesn't use proverbs to make judgments, but the principle of equity is the same. The labor of managing a household, raising a child, maintaining a family, and overseeing assets must be recognized. Mrs. Miller was not just a guest in your home. That last sentence made my face flush. Since the house was built, I had gotten too used to saying, the house times I times sent money to build. I never meant to disrespect my wife, but those words had silently rendered her contributions invisible. What if I want to sell the house? I asked. You should not make that decision unilaterally. The formation of the asset needs to be determined, and an agreement must be reached between you and your wife. And you absolutely cannot, out of anger, demand your brother and his wife move out immediately, change the locks, or throw their belongings on the street. I don't want to do to them what they did to my wife and son. Then don't use someone else's wrongdoing as a license for your own. Mr. Chen said it softly, but I remembered every word. I played him the audio recording of the phone ringing in Jessica's wardrobe. He noted the time of the call and said, this is a significant piece of evidence, but you shouldn't break into the wardrobe to retrieve the phone yourself. If verification is needed, we must ensure the evidence is obtained legally. I asked about getting a subpoena for my mother's bank records and Chris's phone data. He shook his head. You don't have the authority to access that information yourself. You have the records of the money you sent, the screenshot your wife took when your mother asked her to check the account, and documents provided voluntarily by witnesses. The rest will be verified by the proper authorities if they take up the case. As for the slander against your wife, the cropped photo, the things said among relatives, and the use of her SIM card to send fake messages could all be signs of defamation or fraud. But I am not a judge. Your job is to organize the events chronologically, preserve the original evidence, and let each person be held accountable for their own words. I sighed. I used to think that money and paperwork could solve anything. The lawyer looked at me. Money can help you rent a safe apartment, and paperwork can help you protect your rights. But neither can force a child to trust his father again, nor can they make a wife forget she was once abandoned. On the drive back, I kept thinking about his question. Who held your family together so you could work with peace of mind? I had always seen Hannah's work raising our son, caring for my mother, overseeing the construction as the natural duties of a wife. Meanwhile, the money I earned was treated as a great achievement. Injustice sometimes begins when one person's labor is taken for granted. I stopped by the apartment and gave Hannah a copy of the legal file. She was sitting by the window, cutting fabric. The lawyer said the house isn't just mine to do with as I please, I told her. Hannah looked up. Are you disappointed? No. I'm ashamed. She waited silently for me to continue. I used to think because the land was in my name and I sent the money, I had the right to make all the decisions. But I forgot that you raised our son, cared for my mother, managed the construction, and held our family together all those years. Hannah folded the piece of fabric. I don't need you to calculate the monetary value of every meal I cooked. I just need you to not act like those things never happened. I nodded. I understand. She pushed the ledger toward me. Then let's do this the way we agreed. That evening, just after I left the apartment, Michael called. His voice was low and urgent. David, where are you? I need to see you. Alone. We met at a coffee shop near the bus station. As soon as he sat down, he put his phone on the table. I have something I have to show you. On the screen was a screenshot of a bank transfer notification. The recipient was listed as Chris. The amount was $18,000, and the timestamp matched the night I had wired the money to my mother. Where did you get this? I asked. Your wife's phone was on the table that night. The notification popped up. I saw Chris's name, so I took a picture of it. I was going to ask her about it, but Jessica just said she was lending him some money to tide him over for a few days and that he'd pay it back. You knew from the beginning. You knew the money went to Chris. You knew Hannah didn't take it the night she and my son were kicked out. He bowed his head. I was afraid. afraid if I said anything, Jessica would leave, and the kids wouldn't have a mother. I thought my mom was just trying to scare Hannah, that she'd call her back the next morning. Did you call her the next morning? He shook his head. I didn't yell. The anger inside me was much colder than that. He opened another message, a voice note from Chris. Jess, you need to find a way to get that ledger back. As long as Hannah has it, David will find out sooner or later. Just force her to sign the paper and be done with it. Don't let her get to the bank, Michael said. Chris sent it to our family group chat by mistake and then deleted it, but I managed to download it first. Why are you only showing me this now? Because I'm a coward. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. I thought staying silent was how I could keep my family together. But these past few days, Jessica has been trying to get Mom to take all the blame, threatening to take the kids to her parents' place. It was only when I was about to lose everything that I realized my family was already broken the moment I stood by and watched Hannah and Leo walk out into the rain. Are you asking me to forgive you? I asked. I just want you to know that I'm not blind to my own mistakes. I pushed the phone back toward him. You didn't physically throw Hannah's things out the door, but when she was being pushed out, you were standing right there. Your silence was the second hand that bolted that gate shut. Michael's shoulders shook as he bowed his head. I didn't comfort him. Some tears aren't for seeking pity, but for forcing a person to see the price of their own cowardice. I told him to keep the phone, not to delete anything, and to be ready to cooperate when asked. He nodded. Before I left, he asked, Are you going to kick me and my family out of the house? I looked at the brother who had once promised to protect my wife and son. I won't throw anyone's belongings out on the street. But that doesn't mean you and your wife get to continue living as if nothing ever happened. I walked outside. The wind from the bus station blew dust along the sidewalk. I now had not only more evidence about the money, but also a confession from a brother who had chosen self-preservation over doing what was right. That night, I understood that real power doesn't lie in a property deed or a bank balance. It lies in a person's ability to take responsibility for their own choices, especially when doing the right thing means standing up to your own family. About half an hour after I left the coffee shop, my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was panicked. David, Jessica knows. Knows what? She knows I met with you. She checked the location history on the car's GPS and saw I was at the coffee shop near the bus station. When I got home, she cornered me. I didn't say anything, but she must have figured it out. I pulled the car over. Keep your phone safe. Don't argue with her, and don't delete anything. She's tearing the place apart, looking for something. Just let her. Protect your own data. I'll handle the rest, the right way. From the other end, I heard Jessica's voice shout, Who are you talking to? The call abruptly ended. I didn't know it at the time, but as soon as she snatched the phone from her husband, Jessica frantically went through all his messaging apps. She deleted her conversations with Chris, took down posts she had made in the family group chat, and retracted comments implying Hannah had stolen money and run off with another man. But deleting the traces didn't mean it never happened. A few relatives had already taken screenshots. Michael still had the photo of the bank notification and the voice message. My phone still had the 2 contradictory texts from Hannah's number. All Jessica's frantic deleting did was prove her panic. That night, she pulled my mother into a room and closed the door. You have to help me this one time, Mom, she whispered. Help with what? David already found Hannah. Michael even showed him things from his phone. My mother's face went pale. So what do we do now? From now on, if anyone asks, you just say that kicking her out was your decision. You were angry. You suspected her of taking the money, so you told her to leave. As for the bank transfer, you say you let me borrow your phone and I just followed your instructions. My mother looked at her. But I didn't know the money was being sent to your brother. Jessica lowered her voice. I did it for the family. If you don't back me up, David will kick us out. Then who will take care of you? When you get sick, he'll be in the city with his wife and son. Who will you rely on? You already lied for me once. What's one more lie to keep the family together? My mother sat down on the edge of the bed. Perhaps in that moment, she began to realize this was no longer just a family argument. But the fear of losing the house and her control kept her tethered to the lie. Jessica pressed on. All you have to do is cry and say you were scared of losing your grandson, so you acted out of anger. David loves you. He'll let it go. And no matter how angry Hannah is, She wouldn't dare let her husband be seen as an ungrateful son. My mother didn't answer, Jessica added. And don't forget, if the house is sold, you won't have a place this nice to live anymore. That last sentence made my mother look up. Even then, Jessica still believed the mansion was a shield that could deflect any lie. She didn't understand that her desperate attempts to hold onto it were the very thing tearing the family apart. 2 days later, Chris showed up at Hannah's apartment. I was at the lawyer's office, and Sarah had come over to help Hannah with a large sewing order. Hannah had already instructed the security guard not to let any strangers up, but Chris had called and claimed he wanted to return some of the money and settle things peacefully. Hannah didn't believe him, so he messaged Sarah. "Please stay and help me," Hannah told her. "If he's here to talk reasonably, fine. If not, I need a witness." Sarah went into the bedroom and closed the door but didn't lock it. Hannah placed her phone on a bookshelf, with the voice recorder already on, before opening the door. Chris walked in and put a paper bag on the table. "There's $10,000 in here. You take this and give me the ledger." Hannah didn't touch the bag. $18,000 was transferred to your account. "What is this 10,000? It's a little something to help you and your son out." "I don't need your help. Don't act so high and mighty. You've been getting by on sewing money. Just take it." Hannah sat down across from him. "If you're here to return the money, then transfer the correct amount to the correct account, with a clear description and in the presence of witnesses. If you're here to buy my silence, you can take your money and leave." Chris leaned back in his chair and smirked. "You think you've won just because David's back? Family is still family. He'll be angry for a few days, then his mother will shed a few tears, and it will all be over. That's my husband's business. It has nothing to do with you receiving stolen money. I borrowed it, I didn't steal it." "And who gave you permission to borrow it?" Chris paused, then said, "My sister." "Does Jessica have the right to take the money David sent?" He slammed his hand on the table. "Don't talk to me like you're interrogating me." Hannah's voice remained even. "You're the one who came to my home." Chris looked around the apartment, then lowered his voice. "Just give me the ledger and sign the paper saying you left voluntarily. I'll find a way to pay the rest back slowly. This whole thing ends here, and everyone is happy. And if I don't sign," he leaned forward, "then don't blame me if things get ugly. Your son won't be safe." Hannah clenched her fists under the table, but her expression didn't change. "Are you threatening my son?" "I'm just reminding you to be careful. A kid goes to school every day, the streets are busy, anything can happen." Just then, Leo walked out of his room. He had just gotten home from school and froze in the doorway when he heard a stranger's voice. Hannah immediately stood up, blocking him from view. "Get out of here." Chris looked at Leo and then smirked. "He's grown up fast." "Hey kid, make sure you look both ways when you cross the street." Sarah opened the bedroom door and stepped out. "I heard everything. If you don't leave now, I'm calling security." Chris was stunned to see a witness. He shot up from his chair. "You two set me up? You were recording me?" Hannah replied, "You came to my home. I have the right to protect myself. Now please leave." Chris snatched the bag of money and pointed at Hannah. "Don't think you can do whatever you want just because David's back. The person who has been doing whatever they want from the very beginning was not me." By the time security arrived, Chris had no choice but to leave. But before he got in the elevator, he turned and gave Leo a look that terrified the boy. As soon as the door closed, my son asked, "Mommy, is that man going to take me?" Hannah knelt and hugged him. "No one is going to take you. Your dad and I will protect you." For the first time since my return, Leo didn't object when his mother mentioned me as someone who could protect him. Hannah saved the unedited audio file, noted the time, date, and witness, and called me. I came over immediately, but I didn't go looking for Chris. I listened to the recording once, my hands turning to ice. "I want to go find him." Hannah looked at me. "And do what?" "At least warn him to stay away from our son. He's waiting for you to get angry. The moment you assault or threaten him, this whole thing turns into a case of both sides were wrong." I fell silent. She continued, "We have the evidence. We give it to our lawyer and report it to the proper authorities. You agreed we wouldn't solve this with violence." I nodded. It was Hannah, the one who had been pushed into a corner, who was now keeping me from crossing the line. Mr. Chen, our lawyer, listened to the file. "We will make a backup of the original, draft a statement describing the circumstances of the recording, and keep Sarah's information as a witness." I can't say for certain that Chris has committed a crime, but this recording contains evidence of potential threats and coercion. You should submit it to the authorities for them to investigate. From now on, do not meet with this person alone. That evening, my mother showed up at the apartment unannounced. She was carrying a bag of homemade sweet rice cakes and a carton of the milk Leo used to like. Hannah opened the door but didn't invite her in right away. "Is Leo home?" my mother asked. Hannah replied, "He's doing his homework." "Can I just see him for a minute?" Hannah looked at her. "Are you alone?" "I'm alone." Hannah opened the door. My mother walked in, placed the gifts on the table, and called out, "Leo! Grandma's here to see you." Leo came out of his room. The moment he saw her, he immediately shrank back, hiding behind his mother. My mother forced a smile. "I brought the cakes you like." Leo didn't look at the bag. He just asked, "Are you here to kick me and Mom out again?" My mother froze. "No, sweetie, I just came to visit." "Are you going to take my backpack and throw it outside again?" "No." "Are you going to say Daddy doesn't need us anymore?" My mother's lips trembled, but she couldn't speak. Leo held onto Hannah's hand even tighter. "I'm not going back to your house." My mother reached out her hand as if to touch him, but he immediately flinched away. Her hand stopped in midair and then slowly fell to her side. I was standing at the door and saw it all. My mother didn't cry out loud. She just looked at the grandson who used to cling to her legs every afternoon, who now saw her as someone who could take his mother away at any moment. She took the carton of milk from her bag, placed it next to the cakes, and said, "I'll be going now." Hannah didn't ask her to stay. Leo didn't say goodbye. As she passed me, my mother paused. "You've found your wife and son. I guess you don't need me anymore." I replied, "No one is abandoning you, Mom. But you have to understand that family ties can't be used to force people to forget what you've done." She bowed her head and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw her reflection in the polished metal. Small, tired, and for the first time, with nowhere to hide behind the words "we're family." Perhaps it was only then that my mother understood that the greatest punishment wasn't losing the mansion or her authority. It was when the grandchild who had loved her most began to fear the sound of his own name on her lips. The meeting was held on a late May morning in 2026, in a small conference room at Mr. Chen's law office in Columbus. I didn't choose the mansion. Hannah refused to return to a place that had caused Leo so much fear. The law office was neutral ground, ensuring no one could later claim they were coerced. I arrived half an hour early. Hannah sat beside me, dressed in a simple beige blouse, her hair tied back neatly. On the table in front of her were the ledger, the statement from the Women's Association, and copies of other documents. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. Hannah looked toward the door. "I didn't come here to argue. I just want the truth to be set right." Mr. Chen reminded us, "Today, I am only here to witness, guide the discussion, and record the statements. I am not a judge and will not determine who is guilty of a crime. Each person is responsible for their own words." At precisely 9 a.m., my mother walked in with Michael and Jessica. Mom looked as if she had aged 10 years. Michael kept his head down. Only Jessica still maintained a defiant air. The moment she saw Hannah, she sneered. "You still have the nerve to sit here?" Hannah didn't respond. I looked at Jessica. "Today, I'm asking you to stick to the facts and stop insulting my wife." Jessica smirked. "You hear one side of the story and you're already lecturing me." I placed the cropped photo on the table. "You said this was proof of my wife's affair, correct?" "That's right. I saw her on the back of that man's motorcycle with my own eyes." I placed the photo from the workshop, Leo's clinic receipt, and the signed statements from Mark and Sarah next to it. Same day, same time. My son had a high fever and was sitting in the front of the vehicle. You cropped my son and the bag of medicine out of the photo. How do you explain that?" Jessica stared at the papers and said, "Just because a kid was sitting in the front doesn't prove there was nothing going on between them." Hannah spoke, her voice perfectly even. "You accused me of having an affair because of a ride to take my sick son to the doctor. Now that there's proof he was there, you say it's still not enough. Are you looking for the truth, or just an excuse to humiliate me?" Jessica turned away. Her husband was gone for almost 7 years. Who knows how she was living? I looked at her. "You are talking about my wife. Remember that." I then presented the screenshot of the bank transaction. The $18,000 I sent home was transferred to Chris's account. This is the photo Hannah took when Mom asked her to check the phone. This is the screenshot of the transaction notification that Michael saved. The times match. My mother turned to Michael. You had this and you didn't tell me? Michael clasped his hands together. I was wrong to stay silent. Jessica cut in. Chris was just borrowing the money for his business. I was just helping my brother out for a little while. He promised to pay it back. I asked, who gave you permission to take the money? The money was in Mom's account. My mother was startled. I never told you to take it. Jessica turned to her. You always said the money David sent was for the whole family. I said to use it for our shared expenses, not to give it to your brother. Jessica gave a bitter laugh. Now everyone's washing their hands of it. When you were all living in a nice new house, using new things, did anyone ask where the money came from? Hannah opened her ledger and pushed it across the table toward Jessica. Every single item has the source of the funds, the receipt, and the recipient listed. The family using the house doesn't give you the right to take the final construction payment to pay off your brother's gambling debts. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. You and your ledger, counting every penny, making everyone in the house miserable. Hannah's voice didn't waver. If you haven't taken anything, why would a ledger make you miserable? I played the recording of the 2 calls I made to Hannah's number, the sound of the ringtone coming from the wardrobe in Jessica's room. Then I laid out the printouts of the 2 conflicting text messages. One, a plea for help sent from Mrs. Gable's phone, the other, sent 10 minutes later from Hannah's number, claiming everything was fine. You said Hannah took her phone with her. Then why did her number ring inside your wardrobe? Jessica replied, I don't know. Maybe she left it behind. Hannah's phone was broken the night she was kicked out. You kept the SIM card, didn't you? Do you have any proof? Michael suddenly spoke up. I do. Everyone turned to him. That night, I saw Jessica pick up the phone after Hannah left. I asked her why the phone was still here. She said she was keeping the SIM card in case David called, so she could answer. Jessica's face went pale. You're making things up to hurt me. I've been silent for too long, he said. I did it to keep the family together. I asked, keep the family together by sending fake text messages from my wife's number? She didn't answer. Mr. Chen interjected. The data from the cell phone provider and the device used to send the message would still need to be verified by the authorities. But Jessica, you should give a clear answer as to whether or not you kept the SIM card. She looked around and realized she had no allies left. I kept it. But I just didn't want David to drop everything and come home over a silly fight between women. Hannah let out a sad, bitter laugh. Kicking me and my son out in the rain, accusing me of theft, accusing me of having an affair. You call that a silly fight between women? Woo! I then presented the statement from the Women's Association and the letter from the landlord. Hannah reported being forced from her home before I returned. The landlord confirms that a man came to pressure her. And this is the audio file of Chris coming to her apartment, demanding the ledger, and threatening the safety of my son. Jessica turned to my mother. I did all of this for you. You were afraid David would take his wife and son away, afraid the house would be sold. You were the one who said we had to keep Leo here. My mother started trembling. I never told you to take the money, and I certainly never told you to frame her. But you kicked her out. You called her an outsider. You told that little boy his own father had a new wife and didn't want him anymore. My mother bowed her head, covering her face. Jessica turned to Michael. And what about you? You knew I took the money, and you stayed silent. Now you want to act like a saint and push all the blame onto me? Michael replied, I am at fault. I will take responsibility for my part, but I can't keep covering for you. She looked at me, her voice sharp. And don't think you're so clean either. You left for almost 7 years, just threw money at us and didn't care about anything else. If you had been here, would any of this have happened? I replied, You're right about one thing. I am at fault for my absence and for trusting the wrong people. But my mistakes do not give you the right to steal money, doctor photos, take a SIM card, and throw my wife and son out on the street. Hannah looked at Jessica. My husband was far away. That didn't give you the right to steal. My mother-in-law was biased. That didn't give you the right to accuse me of having an affair. Michael was silent. That didn't give you the right to threaten my son. You can be afraid of being poor, afraid of losing the house. You can love your brother, but you do not get to use another person's honor to cover up your own greed. Jessica finally broke down and started to cry. I was just going to kick her out for a few days. Chris promised to pay the money back. I thought everything would go back to normal. I asked, "Who cropped the photo?" I did. "Who took the SIM card?" I did. "Who sent the fake text?" I did. "Who told everyone Hannah transferred the money to her lover?" She was silent for a long time. I did. "Did you know Hannah didn't take the money?" She bowed her head. "Yes." I turned to my mother. "When did you know?" My mother started to sob, her shoulders shaking. 3 days after that night, Jessica told me the truth, that the money had been sent to Chris. She begged me for more time. "Then why didn't you call Hannah and ask her to come back?" I was afraid of losing face. The whole town already knew the story, and I was afraid that when you came back, you would sell the house and take your wife and son away for good. I thought I would just let a few days pass, and then figure something out. A few days, Mom? A few days turned into over a month. My wife and son had to live in a storage shed. Your own grandson is now afraid of the sound of your voice. My mother covered her face, unable to speak. You told me my wife took money and ran off with another man. And then you told my son that I had a new wife and didn't want him or his mother anymore. She sobbed. I was just so scared of losing my grandson. I asked each word slowly and clearly. Were you scared of losing your grandson, Mom? Or did you want the three of us to never find each other again? My mother lowered her hands and looked at me, but she couldn't utter a single word. After my question, the conference room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. My mother didn't answer. She just bowed her head, her hands twisting the hem of her blouse. Jessica sat motionless, and Michael stared out the window, unable to face anyone. It was Hannah who spoke first. I don't need anyone to kneel. Jessica looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Hannah continued, It's easy to kneel for a moment and then get back up. What's harder is to fix what you've broken. She placed the ledger on the table, her voice calm. I have 3 demands. First, you must issue a public retraction in the family group chat and to everyone you told the original lie. I don't want some vague apology about a misunderstanding to avoid responsibility. You will state clearly that the photo was cropped, the money was transferred to Chris, and that I did not take a single dollar. Jessica bit her lip. You want me to lose all face? Hannah looked her straight in the eye. When you spread those rumors, did you think about whether I had any face left? Jessica couldn't argue. Second, the stolen money must be returned, with a clear and committed repayment plan. Third, all the documents related to the threats, the illegal transaction, and the slander will be submitted to the proper authorities. Whatever the legal consequences are, that will be determined by the law, not by me. Mr. Chen nodded. Those are reasonable requests. The parties can draft an agreement regarding the retraction and repayment. As for any potential criminal offenses, the authorities will investigate based on the submitted file. Jessica burst into tears. I have 2 children. If this gets out, how will they live? Hannah replied. Your children are not at fault, which is why I don't want them dragged into this. But you are also a mother. When you threatened the safety of my son, did you remember that he is also a child? Michael, his head still bowed, said softly, I will help Jessica repay the money. I looked at him. You will pay for your share of the responsibility, not to buy Hannah's silence. He nodded. I understand. My mother turned to me. And the house? What are you going to do about the house? I didn't answer right away. I looked at Hannah. She met my gaze and then said, My husband and I have discussed the house with our lawyer. I do not want to live there anymore. My mother was horrified. So you're really going to sell it? I replied, Yes. The land was left to me by my father. But the house was built during my marriage to Hannah. Her labor, her rights are in that house. I cannot make this decision alone. My mother's voice choked. If you sell it, where will I live? I will still provide a place for you to live, Mom. But you can no longer use my duty as a son as leverage to control my wife and my life. Jessica quickly interjected. And what about our family? Are you going to throw us out on the street? I looked at her. No. I will not do to you what you did to my wife and son. I took out a prepared document. My wife and I will give you and your family a reasonable amount of time to find a new place. Everything will be put in writing. If we cannot agree, we will settle it through the proper legal channels. No one will be throwing belongings, changing locks, or humiliating anyone else. Jessica finally bowed her head. For the first time, perhaps, she understood that the victim's decency did not mean she was forgiven. The meeting concluded after nearly 3 hours. Before leaving, my mother stood in front of Hannah. "I'm sorry, Hannah," she said. Hannah was silent. "I know one apology isn't enough," my mother continued. "I just hope that one day, you'll give me a chance to make it right." Hannah replied, "I will not stop you from seeing your grandson. But that will only happen when Leo feels safe. Don't force me, and don't use your tears to force him to forget." My mother nodded. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't try to hug Hannah. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly respect someone else's boundaries. 2 days later, Jessica posted a retraction in the family's WhatsApp group. Her first attempt was vague, mentioning only a misunderstanding about finances. Hannah read it and sent back a single sentence. "You promised to tell the truth." Finally, Jessica had to rewrite it. I, Jessica Miller, confirm that Hannah Miller did not take the $18,000 and was not involved in an improper relationship with Mark. The photograph I previously shared was cropped to remove her son, Leo. The funds in question were transferred by me to my brother, Chris. My previous statements severely damaged Hannah Miller's reputation. I hereby retract those statements and take full responsibility for my actions. Soon after, she and Michael went to Mrs. Gable's house and to the workshop to set the record straight with the people who had heard the rumors. No one yelled at her, but the looks on their faces were enough to make her understand that a reputation, once traded for personal gain, is very difficult to buy back. The file containing the transaction records, the threats, and the fake text messages was submitted to the authorities. I didn't ask when Chris would be arrested or push for an immediate conclusion. Our lawyer said the investigation would take time, and that each person's role would be evaluated based on the evidence. Chris was forced to account for the source of the funds and the words on the audio recording. He sold his motorcycle and some other assets to make an initial partial repayment, with the rest to be paid according to a strict schedule. Michael and Jessica moved out and rented a house near the agricultural depot where he worked. He started taking extra night shifts with his truck to pay off the debt. Their marriage was not the same. I didn't advise him on whether to stay or leave. I just told him, "It's your life. You make your own choices. But don't use your children as an excuse to continue covering up what's wrong." The mansion was put up for sale in early June. When I signed the papers, I didn't feel the pang of regret I had expected. I had spent nearly 7 years building it, but it had never been a true home. From my share of the assets, I bought my mother a 1-story house near the town center. It had 2 bedrooms, a small yard, and a low fence. It wasn't as big as the mansion, but it was close to the clinic and other relatives. The day I gave her the keys, she asked, "Do you still see me as your mother?" I replied, "I will always be your son, and I will always take care of you. But from now on, my marriage, my finances, and how I raise my son are not things you get to decide for me." She nodded. I understand. I didn't know how much she truly understood, but at least she no longer argued that everything she did was for the family. Hannah didn't immediately follow me back to Alaska. She said she needed a stable place for Leo to go to school, and for herself to become fully independent. We moved into a modest house in a suburb of Columbus. Hannah took a baking class and then rented a small storefront to open a bakery. At first, she only sold bread, simple cakes, and a few local pastries. I helped install the display cases, fix the mixer, and made deliveries when I had time. One day, I messed up, and Hannah looked at a tray of burnt muffins and laughed. A multi-millionaire who can't even watch an oven as well as his own son. Leo, standing beside her, immediately chimed in, "Dad's just got a lot of confidence." It was the first time he had called me Dad so naturally. I turned, almost asking him to say it again just to be sure. But instead, I just smiled. "So, you two are ganging up on me now, is that it?" Leo shrugged. "Mom's just telling the truth." Laughter filled the small kitchen. It wasn't loud or luxurious, but I felt more at peace in that moment than I ever had in the mansion. I rearranged my work in Alaska, handing over daily operations to my partner and only traveling when absolutely necessary. I didn't promise to never be away from home again. I just promised Hannah and Leo that wherever I went, whatever I was doing, and whenever I would be back, I would tell them clearly. One afternoon in July, I took Leo to a park to fly a kite. It kept dipping and diving, and he ran until his face was red. When the kite finally caught the wind and soared, Leo unexpectedly asked, "Are you going to leave me and Mom again?" I sat down on the grass to be at his level. "I was far away before, but I never wanted to leave you. My mistake was thinking that sending money was the same as being with you. From now on, no matter where I am, you will never have to guess whether or not I still love you and your mom." Leo looked at me for a long time, then wrapped his arms around my neck. In the distance, Hannah stood by a picnic basket, a small, gentle smile on her face. The wounds in my family didn't disappear just because the guilty had admitted their faults, but at least we had stopped hiding from them and had begun to heal with the truth. Money can build a large house, but only trust, justice, and presence can create a home. Within a family, one must never, out of favoritism, pride, or personal gain, trample on the honor of another. Because whatever you sow, one day, you will surely reap.